Welcome to the MPW Digital Pregame Preview Show, presented by Walk-On's Sports Bistreaux. Number 13, Ole Miss, is on the road again Saturday night. The Rebels, now 4-1 overall, 1-1 in the SEC, after a dramatic 52-51 win over Arkansas, are set to face Tennessee Saturday at 6:30 p.m. at Neyland Stadium in Knoxville. The game will be broadcast nationally on the SEC Network. Tennessee is 4-2, 2-1 in the SEC after consecutive blowout wins over Missouri and South Carolina. The Volunteers also have wins over Bowling Green and Tennessee Tech and losses to Pittsburgh and at Florida. Today on the show, we'll break down X's and O's with MPW Digital's resident football expert, Pete DeWeese. We'll talk about the week in the SEC with the next round's Ryan Brown. Jeffrey Wright of 92.9 ESPN in Memphis will join to discuss Rebels, Volunteers, and the National College Football picture. And Barstool Sports Ben Mintz will look at both the college weekend schedule and the NFL slate from a betting perspective. But first, a word about Walk-Ons. Walk-On's Sports Bistreaux puts everything they've got into bringing you game day with a taste of Louisiana. Dig into their mouth-watering Louisiana cuisine like po' boys, gumbo, and voodoo shrimp, plus fan favorites like juicy burgers and fresh salads, quality fresh ingredients you can't help but crave. Coming soon in November, it's Walk-On's Sports Bistreaux, more than a restaurant, 1737B University Avenue in Oxford. Walk-On's Sports Bistreaux creates an environment that fosters growth and belonging for all, where the team is bigger than the individual, where they exceed expectations and positively impact every community they serve. Think you have what it takes to bring people together and provide a memorable game day experience? Visit 1737B University Avenue in Oxford or 720 Highland Colony Parkway in Ridgeland to join their team today. The restaurant in Ridgeland is open. Be a great place this weekend to watch Ole Miss at Tennessee, the rest of the SEC and national slate, the NFL on Sunday as well. Again, 720 Highland Colony Parkway in Ridgeland. Walk-On's Sports Bistreaux, more than a restaurant. Now we'll start our pre-game show with Pete DeWeese, breaking down Tennessee and Ole Miss from an X and O perspective. Two offenses that look a lot alike, that go at the same pace, try to run up a lot of points, a lot of plays. Should be an exciting game in Knoxville on Saturday night. Here's Pete to talk about it. Pete DeWeese joins us as he always does as we get ready for Ole Miss at Tennessee Saturday night at 6:30 Central, 7:30 Eastern there in Neyland Stadium. Pete, first of all, there were some moments this past Saturday where I said, well, probably going to have to find somebody to fill in for Pete because Pete's not going to make it. Pete was very concerned about Arkansas. He referred to it as a matchup nightmare, and he referred to it as a personal nightmare. He said he'd seen these games before, and as I watched the final drive unfold, I thought, do I know anyone who could do this next week if Pete just perishes? And I couldn't think of anything, and then they score with 1 second to go and no time left on the clock, and I see Sam Pittman hold up the 2, and I said, well, it's either 2 or it's peace out for Pete because I don't know what's going to happen here. And luckily for you and most of the people that are watching this, it went your way, but boy, that was close.
Most of the second half, I was at a 6-year-old birthday party, trying to follow it on Twitter. Not happy that I was at a 6-year-old birthday party. And let's just say that by the end of it, I think I educated some 6-year-olds and some new language, some new terms. And I showed everybody that YouTube TV does work on my phone. At a 6-year-old birthday party. So I was able to catch the end of it. I mean, I think so much has been written about it and people on the site have obviously seen. Everybody watched it, knows. I mean, first of all, KJ Jefferson, right? He came to prove he could do what Ole Miss and the other in-state teams said he couldn't do. And he did a great job.
And he proved it.
Right.
Yeah.
He hats off to that kid.
Yeah.
For the way he played. And, like what we talked about a little bit last week, and everybody wanted to make fun of Sam Pittman when they see the stuff. Kids love him. They love playing for him. And he knocked it out of the park with his 2 coordinator hires. And when he took over, there wasn't a ton of talent on that team, but there was some speed on that team. And they've done a great job of kind of maximizing that. And then I think the big thing is I think Kendall Briles has kind of gone away from his roots to accommodate his quarterback. And he's done a really good job of blending what Kendall has always been with what KJ needs him to be. And look, you go back and you watch the 2-point conversion play, he essentially had 4 options. He had the ball in the end zone that he threw that fell incomplete. He had the pitch to the tailback as an option. He had himself as a runner, and then he had the shovel pass underneath. It's a very dynamic play call. There's a lot of things that can go right, a lot of things that can go wrong. Had he shoveled that ball underneath, we don't feel the same way. We're not happy after the game. I think probably might have gotten him in the end zone.
Was he unable to shovel it because of the pressure that Ole Miss got on KJ? Kind of took away a little bit.
I think part of it was pressure in his face, and I think part of it too is you see the sure thing, right? You see the kid that's in the end zone, and so you try to force that issue a little bit. And so earlier in the game, I believe they had worked a similar scheme, and it wasn't there, right? So that's in the back of your head too, probably as a player. There was not a doubt in my mind Pittman was going to go for it. Everything. He wasn't going to stop Ole Miss, and he knew it. He's on the road. Your kid, you've got momentum. Let's go, And fortunately it fell Ole Miss's way. And the unfortunate reality is I think Ole Miss is probably I'm not going to say the same result necessarily, but probably looking at another shootout again this week.
Tell you what, if you're going to play shootout week after week, it's a good thing to have Matt Corral on your team.
It's a very good thing. I mean, everybody obviously, I think if you watch the broadcast on television, you heard every 3 snaps about last year's game against Arkansas. But the kid has just continued to improve, from the work he's put in the film room to what he's done with QB Collective and the different groups and quarterback coaches that I know he works with in the off season, to what he's done with the Ole Miss staff and what they've done together. I mean, his growth has been phenomenal. And I think the big thing is, is you come out of the Alabama game and the reality is the kid didn't have a bad game against Alabama. The kid didn't have a Heisman game against Alabama. And I think it disappointed everybody. He didn't make massive mistakes. I mean, you look at his turnovers, they're not on him. You get a tight end matched up with the best player in the draft, and he gets a strip on a ball when he's trying to throw that goes the other way. Like, that's not on the quarterback, right? So I think his growth has really been impressive. If he can kind of continue that throughout the course of the season, I mean, Ole Miss has its weaknesses on offense, but the quarterback position is not one of them because that kid's playing lights out right now.
He is. He was amazing Saturday. I mean, I referred to it as a perfect game, and I'm sure he made a mistake somewhere, but wow. I mean,
he was absolutely dialed in and just, on third down, when they gave him the underneath, he took the underneath. And when he had the chance to go over the top, he went over the top. And just, the big things I've worked both sides of the ball. And one of the things I used to always say when I was coaching defense is quarterbacks by nature are inherently greedy, right? So it's to humble that greed, force him to take all the underneath stuff, right? And when you play really good ones, they'll pay, they'll make you pay for that. I mean, Josh Dobbs, who thinking about playing Tennessee, Josh Dobbs, who played at Tennessee and has bounced around in the NFL, coached against Josh twice in high school. And Josh was a kid that he had the arm, he could put the ball downfield. He had really good players to get it to, but Josh was smart enough to beat you underneath and just nickel and dime you and force you to make a mistake. And so now that Corral has gotten into that mode and he's willing to take the soft stuff underneath, you start having to change the way you play. And the next thing you know, it's 63 yards down the field.
Yeah.
So.
All right, so let's dive into Tennessee. It's obviously a huge opportunity for Ole Miss. I mean, the truth is the SEC West is back open again with Alabama losing to Texas A&M. And LSU's next week, and before the season, you would have said, "Boy, this LSU game." And now you look at it and go, "It's going to be, could be just a party." Basically,
Yeah.
LSU is it's trouble. So this is a huge opportunity for Ole Miss to hit the turn at 5-1 with that game coming. But to do it, I get the sense, Pete, that they're going to have to win a shutout. The over/under on this is like 80 or some insane number.
It's 80, and I'm still taking the over. Like, I mean, that's you watch the two teams play. There's a lot of stark contrast between what the two defenses are and how they operate. From an offensive standpoint, there is so much similarity. Their quarterback is not Corral. He's a very good player. They've done a really good job creating opportunity for him. The reality is neither team is great on defense. Tennessee statistically is a little bit better than what Ole Miss is. But neither, both offenses have the ability to give the other one problems. And so it's going to be interesting to see what this looks out like. I mean, Neyland Stadium's a fun place to watch a game.
Mm-hmm.
I've been up there for games before, not an Ole Miss game, but been up there for games before. If the orange doesn't bother you and you don't get tired of hearing Rocky Top, it's a cool place to watch a game. I've had two kids play there. One actually played for Lane Kiffin there. And so, it's a cool place. It'll be a fun atmosphere. The hope, if you're Ole Miss, is that one, the experience of going back isn't too much for Lane, and not that I think it will be. But we all know he likes to play that he likes to poke and prod and do some of that stuff. And we've seen that on social media, but I don't think at the end of the day, it's going to be that big of a difference for him.
Luckily for him, he's been back before as a coordinator and
exactly
had all the hoopla and had to have the security and all that stuff.
And he'll hear the boos and all that stuff, but that'll all go away quickly. So I don't think that's going to be a big deal. It's going to come down to how can Ole Miss execute, and how can they execute in that environment when the crowd gets loud.
I'll let you take it from here. I'll let you guide me wherever you want to go. I don't know.
All right.
Start offense or defense, so I'll hand it off.
All right. So, kind of getting us started here, there's not a ton of things I really want to say about the Ole Miss offense, right? I mean, I would love after the season, maybe there's an opportunity where we can get together and we can talk about some of the things that Ole Miss did throughout the season that gave people problems. And, it's funny when you watch Ole Miss because they do some things that are really high level, right? But the last touchdown that Ole Miss scored, it was a hitch and go, and it was a I'm sure a tendency-based call, something that they had seen the way the corner was reacting earlier in the game. But, anybody listening to this that played junior high football probably had hitch and go in the playbook, right? It's nothing new. It's nothing earth shattering. But it's great recognition. It's great ball, and it's well executed. Right. And it's understanding situation where defenses are expecting you probably to work short, get the ball out of bounds, do some different things. All of a sudden the corner jumps the hitch route, and the next thing you know, you got a kid running past you. So, there's a lot of things you can say about Ole Miss, but really, defensively, they're going to face a little bit different defensive structure than what they've seen throughout most of the season. They're a 4-2-5 base defense at Tennessee. Their coordinator came from Penn State, where there's good defense played at a lot of places in that conference. But it's a little bit different style. In a lot of ways, it's not as aggressive, relies a little bit more on zone coverages until they can get you to 3rd and long. And then they've got some fun games that they can play. But that's kind of who Tennessee is. They're not built on pressure. They're not a team that's going to line up and just come after you nonstop. I mean, that was one of the things we talked about last week with Barry Odom was a lot of Ole Miss fans probably thought that they were this soft defense, but outside of that Ole Miss game from last season, they're really an aggressive by nature defense. Tennessee's not the same. They're I don't want to say they're passive, but they're going to trust their front four as much as they can. And they're going to try to play some different zone coverages behind you. I don't think that their defensive line is great, okay, which obviously helps Ole Miss. Where Tennessee has been good, they're 12th in the conference in passing defense. And so you look at that and you go, okay, we should be able to throw it all over them. They're high in the conference in turnovers, are fairly high. They're in the upper level of turnovers, and then a lot of it is their safeties. Their safeties do a really good job with some things, and so that they rely on kind of changing that picture on the back end, getting linebackers underneath some routes and trying to do some things. So they're giving up a decent amount in the passing game, but they're not. But they also have the ability to turn you over. So it's kind of interesting when you watch them. They're 6th in scoring defense in the SEC right now at 21.5 a game. But if you take Bowling Green and you take, I think, Tennessee Tech, right, and you just look at the Power 5 games, they're giving up 30 a game. So if you're Ole Miss offensively that has the ability to score points in bunches, you have to feel good about that, right? When you look at their schedule, there's the loss to Florida, who we've seen has the ability to play good football. I mean, they took Alabama to the wire, right? And so you look at that game and you're like, okay, Florida's good. Tennessee scored some points. They gave up 38. And then you flip to the Missouri game and you're like, man, they blew Missouri out. Missouri's not playing good defense. Missouri moved the ball on the Tennessee defense. They had a lot of success, and then they would shoot themselves in the foot, whether it was by penalty or by turnover. They had success moving the ball early in the game against Tennessee. And so I think that Ole Miss knows, looking at this film, where the challenges do lie with the Tennessee defense. But they have to feel good about their chances and ability to move the football, because they've proven they can do it against everybody but Alabama. And Alabama and Georgia live in a different world right now, So, ultimately it comes down to, can Ole Miss win at the line of scrimmage? I thought their play against Arkansas was much better than their play against Alabama. We talked last week. The Arkansas front is not a bad football team. Those guys up front in their front seven, those linebackers on defense, very productive players. And Ole Miss handled those guys so much better. And so
did such a good job on Trey Williams.
Nick Broker is he is a kid that you have to kind of really watch him sometimes to appreciate him, I think. But like I know when we were prepping, I think for Alabama, I showed you the clip where he was almost taken to a knee and then somehow spun out of it and stayed on. The kid's really athletic, and I think that's the game that fits him. Playing the 4-man front, I'm curious to see how Ole Miss attacks them in the run game, what they do differently. They haven't seen a ton of true 4-man front this year. It's been a lot of odd front defenses. So I'm curious to see what that looks like. I think that Ole Miss will, Ole Miss runs the football. Everybody gets caught up in what Corral can do with his arm, but they run the football. And I think they're going to come out, and it's not going to be any different this week. They're going to try to get Tennessee to commit those safeties to the run game, so that they can open up some of their downfield stuff. So, I think Ole Miss will be able to have some success on offense. I think at this point, we all kind of realize, what Ole Miss is able to do as far as the outcome of the game. It comes down to their defense, right? What can they do with the bodies that they have to try and get Tennessee, off the field? So, I really kind of want to focus on that and some of the things that Tennessee does. And I think one of the most interesting things to me is I've spent some time studying the Baylor offense when Art Briles was head coach, and of course Kendall's there and Levy's there, and all these guys that we're familiar with now in these names. And the interesting thing is Kendall has departed in some ways from what they were doing at Baylor, and Levy has departed in part because of the Kiffin influence. And my understanding, what I've heard in coaching circles, is that, when Lane had Kendall working with him at FAU, he brought him in. He wanted to learn some of that stuff. But it didn't all sit with Lane great. He thought he could do get some of the same elements with stuff he'd already been doing and didn't have to fully jump ship into that Baylor world. So what's funny is that Lane makes that decision, brings Kendall in. Kendall ends up leaving. Lane takes the pieces he likes. He keeps it with his stuff, gets to Ole Miss, brings Levy in, and it's more of the same. It's here's mine. Bring me what's good from you. Let's pair it together. But here's some of the things that maybe you guys have majored in that we don't want to, right? Heupel's kind of taken the approach where, hey, I've now learned this stuff from you guys at UCF. I love it. Let's keep doing it. So in some ways, I look at this Tennessee offense, they're closer to the offense that Jeff Lebby ran on his own than what Jeff Lebby is running now at Ole Miss. Which I think is interesting. That being said, there's still a ton of similarity between what Ole Miss does and what Tennessee does on offense. That they are built to run the football. That's what they want to do. And then when you give them an opportunity, they're going to take shots down the field, very much like Ole Miss does, right? They're going to work their RPO game. They're going to throw fast screens. They're going to try to run, get you to commit safeties to the box, and then they're going to try to use their speed to get behind you. Tennessee's averaging 41 points a game right now, 253 rushing yards a game, 220 passing yards a game, which the 220 passing yards a game, you look at it and go, Ole Miss is throwing for a ton more than that. Some of it is, if you look at Tennessee's schedule, it is not close to the same as the Ole Miss schedule. You take the Florida game out of there, the schedules aren't comparable, right? And so a lot of it is, I think Tennessee's getting late in games. They've got a lead. They're protecting the ball.
Right.
But early in games, they're not afraid to take shots. They're throwing fast screens. They're trying to get cheap, easy yards out on the perimeter. A lot of the same ways that Ole Miss does. Much like Ole Miss, tempo is key to their success. I ran the numbers today just out of curiosity. In 6 games at 4-2, Tennessee is 75 plays per game. And Ole Miss is, 4-1, so 5 games, and they're 76.4 plays per game. So you're talking about two teams that are both playing foot on the gas as much as they possibly can. What I see when I watch Tennessee, they have a small run scheme plan, a small screen plan, and then they have a strong, what I call a shot menu and a red zone menu, right? They may come into a game with, and Ole Miss is very similar. They may come into a game with 4 run plays, and that's it. They find 4 things that they think they're going to do well in based on the matchups, the formation, what they think the defense is how they're going to react to that formation. And they may carry those 4, 5, 6 runs, and that is the bulk of their run game. And everything else is, here are these shot plays, here are these special things that we're going to work to attack the coverages that you do and the tendencies that you've shown. And then they're always going to have their red zone menu, where when you get down in the red zone and the defensive structure changes and other tendencies start to arise, how they're going to attack you. I watched Tennessee, South Carolina. I watched Tennessee, Missouri. I didn't watch all of those games, but I watched most of them. And then I watched a little bit of the Florida game. I had watched a few snaps prior to this week, just when they were live on television, because I wanted to see what they were doing at Tennessee and, offensively in particular. And when I went back and I watched those games this week, I didn't see a ton of difference. When you watch them against South Carolina, they opened the game. Their first drive was a 14-play drive, 8 passes in 14 plays, so fairly balanced, right? But they went tempo on 11 of 14 plays. And I called tempo being 25 seconds or more on the play clock. A lot of those snaps, like I'm sitting here looking at my notes, you're talking, the first play of the game, the play clock doesn't matter. And that's one of those 14, right? But you're 27 seconds, 31 seconds, 29, 28, 28, 29, 29. You get them in second and long. All of a sudden, they snap it with 10 seconds on the play clock. They get the first down, or actually, they get to a 3rd and 3, and they snap it with 30 seconds on the play clock again. So you're talking about a 40-second play clock, and they're snapping it within 15 seconds of
they're flying.
The ending.
Yeah,
they're moving, right?
Yeah.
And so the good news for the Ole Miss defense is that they have had to operate in that world. They see it in practice, right? Ole Miss has the ability to replicate that tempo for them. They saw it in the spring, they saw it in the summer and in fall camp. So I think that is one thing that in theory can benefit the Ole Miss defense. It doesn't benefit a lot of teams. Is that there's a lot of teams that can move that tempo in practice and keep things really, really simple, right? Ole Miss can operate at that tempo in practice, give the defense a look, and still be diverse. And so I hope that plays a factor, is that the Ole Miss defense isn't completely shell shocked by the tempo that Tennessee is going to operate at, because it is a very much a breakneck pace, very much like Ole Miss uses. When you give them opportunity to go fast, they're doing it, right. When they're positive on the sticks. So, first down, if you get second and 4, they're rocking and rolling. You get second and 14, they're making sure they get in something that gets them a manageable third down. But if they can stay ahead of the sticks, they are rolling till they get into the red zone. Game tends to slow down a little bit because, again, you want to be right. You want to make sure if you're in the red zone, you're taking advantage of it. And so you look at that, and the reality is those are all things that I would say about the Ole Miss offense, right? First down
sounds like you're describing Ole Miss.
It does, right? And you go back and you look, first down, like start of a drive, lots of motion. After that, not a ton of motion. And when they do, it's very simple. It's very repetitive. You see it multiple times throughout the game. And oftentimes it's being used to set something up, right? But it's something that they can keep real simple and they can build into their tempo. But that possession and 10, as they call it in the football world, P and 10, the first play of a drive, statistically, if you get a first down on P and 10, the numbers tell you that, and talk about analytics, the numbers tell you that if you can get a first down on P and 10, that statistically your chance of scoring on that drive jumps exponentially. I mean, it's a big jump. So a lot of coordinators, when they're scripting and they're planning for a game, they, your call sheet will have your best second and long calls, your best third and short, third and medium, third and long. A lot of guys invest a lot of time in that P and 10 script. And it's a list, and they're going to go right down that list. And the start of every drive is going to be something new off of it, because they're trying to generate a big play, a first down to start the drive, because they know that once you get that ball rolling, statistically, your chance of success is so much higher, right? So you see a lot of that out of them. You'll see them start the drive with screen passes on the perimeter that give them a chance to make a guy miss and get 10, 12, 15 yards, right? You see a lot of that kind of stuff on first down. You don't necessarily see a lot of downfield shots on first down, but you'll see a funky formation. You'll see a funky motion. You'll see a reverse. You'll see things of that starting a drive or coming out of a timeout or coming out of a quarter change or a television, break or whatever, where they've had a chance to get them on the sidelines, talk to them, because, okay, guys, we're pulling this trick out of our bag, and then we're back into our tempo as quickly as we can. So, again, all things that you see when you watch Ole Miss play. So the similarity for me was really interesting. So what I kind of thought I would do is just show you kind of some of the base formations and the ways that they use them. Okay. When I charted the first drive of that South Carolina game, until they got in the red zone, you basically had 3 formations. Okay. And this is the normal 2x2 formation, doubles, ace. Everybody's got different names for it. Okay. But a standard formation you see all over the college football and high school football world, What makes them different, and this is what comes from that Baylor tree, is typically you're going to see guys, some teams, you watch Mississippi State play, and sometimes this H is down here and the X is right here. And teams will do different things, and they'll adjust their splits based on concept. The Baylor system and what Tennessee is using from that system is they take these guys and they are very often very wide. They want to create as much space as they can from here to here, because they're forcing you to make a decision about your defensive structure, right? We talk every week about the numbers game and how you gain that statistical and that numbers advantage. One of the ways they choose to do it, we talked about with Alabama, and even in times with Tulane, it's about adding extra people in here and creating extra gaps. And that's how they're forcing you to make decisions, right? With Tennessee, and a lot of the times it's by creating these huge gaps. Okay. If that ball is on the hash, these two receivers are both going to be outside the numbers, 2 feet apart sometimes, right? But the guys that are all the way to the field, they're all the way to the field. They're not down around the other hash. They are going to be wide, and they're going to make you make a decision. Am I going to put 2 over 2, which forces me into a man-to-man type situation where now I have a potential matchup? Or am I going to commit a third player to it, which now lightens my box here and opens me up for some type of run game? When Tennessee opens the drive against South Carolina, you saw some diversity. Okay. One thing they like to do here is they like to motion this running back out in a full speed motion. Okay. And they're doing it for a couple of different reasons. They can block on the perimeter with an option to throw him the screen. And this was actually the first play that they ran against South Carolina. On the back side, they gave this receiver a little option route. So he has an option versus this defender or whoever's over him. If he can beat him across his face, he's going to. And if the defender has inside leverage, he's going to break out. Then behind him, you're going to put either a post or a dig route typically. So you're creating levels in the defense and you're finding ways to stress them. So for the quarterback, all he had to see when they motioned this tailback out against South Carolina, and in South Carolina's game plan, they came out and played a ton of man-to-man coverage. And that's one thing when I'm watching that game, I'm going, I don't see Ole Miss going in this direction. So a lot of the things that they were able to do against South Carolina, if you guys have gone back and watched that game, I don't know if it looks the same against Ole Miss, because I don't think Ole Miss takes the same approach. South Carolina watched the Missouri game and said, hey, man, they ran the ball for a ton of yards. So they committed as many guys as possible to the box and played as much man-to-man as possible. Well, it did a couple things. One, it made them predictable, but it also gave them some really obvious situations to be able to throw the ball. So, the first play of the game, like I said, they motioned the tailback out. They see a guy expand with it. So now he just comes backside. This kid works a slant, and they're rocking and rolling. Okay. All of a sudden, it's second and medium. They jump into a new formation, and then they get rolling again. The other things that they will do out of this, and this is some carryover, I think, from the Arkansas game, is you'll see that same motion. And if he likes his numbers, it will be tagged with a quarterback draw. Tennessee's quarterback is not KJ Jefferson. He's not as big as he is. But he can move. He's not a bad player by any means. He, transferred from, I think, Virginia Tech, has a lot of snaps under his belt at this point in his career, and is an effective runner. And so again, by taking these crazy wide splits and motioning this back out, you're playing the numbers game. If Ole Miss leaves 5 guys in the box, which is what we've seen more times than not from Ole Miss, right? They can work a run scheme, whatever they need it to be, right? It can be some type of a gap scheme where they're pulling a guy, and they can account for those 5 bodies. And now you give the quarterback the opportunity to run the football. This is something you see Ole Miss do. When you look, and that's again, we talk about the similarities between the two offenses. When these guys get in the red zone, the quarterback 100% becomes a threat. If you go back and look at Ole Miss, Corral designed runs are typically not in the offense unless it's short yardage or they're in the red zone, right?
They've got a lot of it in the red zone.
A ton of it in the red zone, right? Yeah. If they're down around midfield and Corral's running, it's either short yardage or he's scrambling when the pocket is just opened up for him, right? But once they get in the red zone, they're using his legs. They're forcing you to account for the 11th guy on the field. Tennessee does the exact same thing. This kid at midfield, they'll use his legs. When you get near the red zone, when you get into third and short, he is going to be a factor with his legs. And if they watch the Arkansas tape, and obviously they have, that's part of their game plan. There's not a doubt in my mind, right? So you're going to see them. You're going to see, a couple of things. Like I said, you're going to see these super wide splits. And the question is, how does Ole Miss choose to match the width of the splits? How is that going to dictate how many players Ole Miss can commit to the run game? Because, we've all seen the struggles that are there with Ole Miss, obviously, playing run defense. Some of the other things that I've seen them do, if particularly with the ball in the hash and these two guys are closer together, they will throw a ton of fast screens into the boundary. If this guy wants to come down and be a part of the run game, they will go block this corner and they will throw it right now to the Z. And the way that they work that stuff, your goal is 4 yards, right? Any fast screen, your goal is to get 4 yards from the line of scrimmage and out of bounds. Or if the defender jumps outside, you shave his hip. In other words, when you watch them and you watch good teams that run a lot of receiver screens, what you want to happen, if you're going to have him go block the corner's job is to get outside and turn it back into all of his help. A poorly coached team, you will see guys get all the way in here, which allows the pursuit to get to them. When you watch Tennessee and when you watch teams that really make a living on this, they're going to attack, expect him to jump outside, and then they're going to come and rip right through this hip and then try to get back on the perimeter again. And when I'm watching these Tennessee receivers, you can tell that they're teaching that 4 yard landmark. That's their aiming point. And as soon as something flashes outside your eyes, it's not cut back inside. It's rip through and get shave the butt and get as skinny as you can and get back outside. And they do a really good job with it. The other thing that they will do a good job of is if you're going to commit this guy to the run, they will, and you see a lot of this in the NFL in the past few years, maybe not quite as much in college football, but you still see it, where he's going to work a little half speed route and he's going to run just a little out route, and they're going to throw this out route where this receiver, instead of running a full speed route, is just positioning this corner to now block him. So it's essentially a screen that's happening down the field, but you're not engaging in the block until after the ball's been thrown and caught. Okay. That they ran that quite a bit against South Carolina because of what South Carolina was giving them in coverage. It made a lot of sense. I don't know if it'll look the same from an Ole Miss standpoint. The other formation that I kind of jumped out as probably the next most popular one was this type of formation. Again, it's one you see every week from everybody that Ole Miss is going to play. The difference again is how wide these guys are going to remove themselves from the core of the formation. If you look at it and the way that I have it drawn up, if Ole Miss is going to commit to stopping the run and they're going to put 7 guys in the box, you put guys now in a one-on-one situation. You can still play zone coverage, especially to this side of the field. But now you have forced this guy, because of the split of the defense, or the split of the receiver, rather, you have forced him into an essential one-on-one situation. If they like their matchup, they have a lot of ways that they'll take advantage of it. And this is one of the things that comes out of that Baylor offense that Levy has kept on. And you know, the kind of funny thing is for Ole Miss fans, if you go back to Phil Longo and the just get open that people talk about, he's borrowing the same concept. And what it really doesn't mean just go do whatever the hell you want to, right? There's structure and there's rules based in it, but he took a different approach to it than what the Baylor guys do and what Heupel and those guys are doing right now. So what they'll do when they can find a guy that's singled up, like the receivers drawn here, okay, they will give him a choice route. He has the ability to go vertical. He has the ability to run a post, and he has the ability to put the brakes on and come right back down his stem at about 10 to 12 yards. Okay. So when you isolate a corner right there, it's hard to be right when you're that defensive back. What they're going to teach this receiver is to attack the man. He's going to run right at him. And the first rules on that route is it is a track meet to 10 yards. So he is pushing as fast as he can to 10 yards. At 10 yards, he's going to make a decision based off the leverage of the corner. If he's got the corner beat, he's staying vertical. There's nothing else to think about. Quarterback's going to put it over the top. If that corner is getting depth and playing with cushion and bailing out of there, he's going to get to 12 and he's going to put the brakes on and come right back down the stem, and the quarterback's going to throw it right underneath because there's no help underneath. If that corner, when he gets attacked, starts getting depth in his outside leverage, he's going to stick his foot in the ground at 10 and he's going to run the post.
So how does the quarterback know what's coming?
So it is one of those things, and this is probably one of the reasons that Lane didn't fully buy into this concept. You have to be committed to it. It takes reps. It takes time, because you need those guys to be consistently on the same page, right? And so there's coaching cues that you use where you talk about how you're reading the depth and the leverage of those defenders to get guys on the same page. So they have the ability, they can do it with both of these outside guys. They can do it with just one guy. Or if you're playing them the right way, they'll even do it with just this guy. And the rules don't change. It's where's the matchup. So if they're doing it here.
You said the rules don't change. The route rules don't change.
The route rules don't change. Okay. Right. So if they're doing it here, they're going to put this guy on some type of like a comeback or a little sit down route so that he can occupy the corner. Well, now, again, if you've got man-to-man here, he's reading it the same way. If I can go by him, I'm going by him. If he gives outside leverage, I'm going to take the inside. And if he gets a lot of depth and gives me cushion, I'm going to come right back down my stem. And so, like, you know, I'm watching in the first drive against South Carolina. You saw a version out of this play out of the formation that I showed you prior to this one. Against South Carolina, again, because they're playing soft man, they worked this one a good bit where they're hitting the guy in the slot and he's working back down his stem because that safety was playing off and getting a good bit of depth. So they use those splits to create those one-on-one situations to try and put you in a bind. So when you watch Missouri, who from a defensive structure standpoint is much more similar to Ole Miss, Missouri tried to keep some guys back and play some different zone things. Well, that now makes you more susceptible to the run, and Tennessee ran all over them. Against an even front, against South Carolina, they ran a ton of just what's old school ISO off of their zone look. So they worked some type of inside zone with the offensive line and then insert the tight end on the linebacker and ISO him. And the quarterback has the ability to hand it off, or he has the ability to throw some type of an RPO or some type of a screen on the perimeter, right? You see a lot of that against a four-man front They ran it some against Missouri's odd front, but against Missouri's odd front, they really liked their gap scheme run plays. Okay. And so when you watch them against Missouri, so when we talk about zone schemes versus gap schemes, zone schemes, it's not a man blocking system. Everything is about, hey, I've got from my nose to his nose, and anything that enters my zone, I have to be in control of them. And there's a lot of nuance and for teams that really spend a lot of time in it. But it's a very popular run scheme because it accounts for almost anything the defense can do, right? When you get into gap schemes, things become more of a man blocking scheme. Your rules have to be very sound. And if defenses give you uncomfortable and untraditional looks, it can sometimes cause some problems. So they came out against Missouri, again, a similar defensive structure than Ole Miss, and they felt comfortable with where they were going to be. And they gave them a lot of gap schemes. So they ran what traditionally is known as power football, power O. What they did differently is a lot of teams, when they run power, this tackle is going to be taught to block down. If there's anything in the gap, he takes him. If not, he's going to climb to the backer. Because of the defensive structure at Missouri, okay, instead of blocking down with this guy, what they actually did was they locked him on this end, no matter where the end was. They put the tight end on this overhang defender, no matter where he was. They get a clean double team here. They pull here for the Mike backer. And then this guy works what's known as a gap hinge. He's going to close this gap down so that nobody can blitz that gap. And if nothing comes, he's going to take anything on the outside. If anything threatens that gap, he's going to close it off, and he's going to try to build the wall by getting hip to hip with that center. So you don't allow any defender to kind of run through right there. So again, going back, they can use the same RPO schemes they used on the zone. They can throw fast screens out here. They can throw hitches. They can throw slants. They can throw speed outs. Okay. But they really used a lot of these gap schemes to handle the front. So if you're Ole Miss and you're committed to playing the same box structure that you've played for a long time, you absolutely have to win at the line of scrimmage. And that has not been Ole Miss's strong suit throughout the course of the season.
At all. So in this play, the jack right there, is he pursuing backside, or is he free to blitz, or what?
Different teams are going to handle it different ways. Okay. If this end is outside, it's likely that when this guy pulls, you're telling him, get downhill, him to scrape over the top. And now this jack becomes your fold fitter.
Okay.
So that if the ball cuts back, you're there.
Gotcha.
If this end is now responsible for the inside gap, now he ends up being your outside fitter.
Okay.
And he can, in theory, be late to it, because if the ball does get vertical, you'd like for him to be able to fold yourself back in. The issue is this: because of these splits, if you walk this strong safety out like I have drawn, you have one safety to now help you fit the box. Now you can change that picture. You can walk this free safety over and maybe back him up, but now you're weak away from the tight end, and any type of counter action, you're outnumbered, you're out leveraged. So they use these just simple premise of these wide splits to again force you to make decisions. And it just comes back to the numbers game. You know, any coach can create numbers. They can put you in a bind, they can stress defenders, and they can gain a numbers advantage. Ultimately, it comes down to, okay, I've got the numbers advantage. Do I have the personnel advantage? Right. And so that's, again, I just think it comes back to, how are these guys going to play? These guys affect how these guys play, right? And how well that those front three play is really going to affect what they have to do with the secondary. And the issue with for Ole Miss right now is, and I know I see a lot of back and forth and people, sending me texts and different things. And
I was getting ready to ask you about this. There's so much conversation about the scheme.
there's so much conversation about the scheme. And, here's the thing, right? Everybody's going to Iowa State to learn the scheme. Iowa State does not play bad run defense, right? Iowa State does play in a conference that probably makes it a little easier from week to week to defend the run because if you're Iowa State and you look at some of the teams that they play from week to week, there's not necessarily a ton of there's some effective run teams in that league.
But it's track meet football a lot.
It is. It's track meet football,
and
where Iowa State wins a lot of those games, quite honestly, is because they play a physical brand of football.
Right.
But realistically, look at that conference and tell me who really wants to play a smash mouth style. Right. I mean, okay, Chuba Hubbard's at Oklahoma State, and they're a very good football team, and he runs the football and one of the top rushers in the country, but they're still not playing a physical style.
Yeah, I was going to say, I wouldn't think of them as smash mouth. I wouldn't think of Kansas State as smash mouth. Oklahoma certainly.
Kansas State is the closest to it,
and
they're still trying to become what they want to be. They're not yet he hadn't brought Dakota Ball all the way to Manhattan yet. But they're not. And so, when you're committing to go to this defense, there's still a lot of good stuff about it. And look, you watch Georgia play, and there's elements of what Ole Miss is doing that Georgia's doing. The difference is the bodies Georgia's doing it with, and then Georgia's ability to get out of it and into something else when the time comes. Right.
Yeah, Lane got asked about scheme like the other day, and he was asked about nose tackle, and his answer was a diplomatic, "Hey, look, KD's done some nice things for us." But he said, we're always trying to get better, which I do that, what he said, what he meant every week. And what he meant was, yeah, we'd love to have a big dominant Georgia nose tackle who can't be double teamed really and frees us up to do a lot of different things. But as of right now, we don't have it.
It's when you look at the Ole Miss roster, they're in the scheme that fits what they have. The problem is what they have isn't healthy, right? I mean, we haven't seen Ole Miss fully healthy on defense since the Louisville game. You add Springer back in the mix, and Reese gets back into a little bit more comfortable spot, and all your linebackers are healthy, and do they suddenly become world beaters? No, right? But at least you're more back in your comfort zone, so to speak. And I think that right now, that's part of it. Scheme matters. It's important. But talent plays a big role, and it's hard. Ole Miss has had a very difficult time consistently recruiting on the defensive side of the ball for whatever reason. Part of that reason, in my opinion, is the lack of consistency in what they've tried to do for the last 20 years. I mean, when I was on campus, Art Kaufman was the defensive coordinator my first year, and then that changes, and we go to a 3-4 with Don Lindsay, and then we go to the 4-2-5 with Driesbach, and it was constant change, right? But since Orgeron left, because Orgeron's time period was probably the most consistent Ole Miss has been, other than the Womack years. But even then, there was some transition early in his, and then all of a sudden he's gone. And yeah, Crime and those guys tried to keep some of those same elements, but they're playing a little bit different scheme, and they're needing a little bit different bodies. And so, some of these teams like Alabama and that have consistently been really good on defense, and Georgia now, who Kirby's been at Georgia and Athens for how long now? Right?
7-8 years.
So they've had plenty of time to recruit the guys they need. And oh, by the way, they're doing it at places that don't have a lot of trouble recruiting.
Yeah.
Right. But look at LSU. LSU has Dave Aranda, who's one of the best defensive coordinators in the country. And he inherited some really damn good players in Baton Rouge. And they're lights out on defense. And he and O can't get along, so he leaves. And so what does O do? He goes out and he hires Pelini because Pelini schematically is similar, it's close to what Ed is used to, but didn't fit because they've been recruiting for Dave, and all of a sudden he's gone. And here's Pelini trying to take all these really good athletes, kids that were 4 stars coming out of high school, and plug them into a system that's completely different. Well, now Pelini's gone. So you're new coordinator now. And again, look at the results, because as the scheme changes, the body type, the skills required, all those things matter. You take a Tony Connor and you take a Cody Pruitt when they were at Ole Miss. They had really productive careers at Ole Miss. They were in the perfect system that fit their skill set. That's the reality. Those two kids aren't the same players on a lot of different teams because they probably would have been asked to do something that didn't fully suit their skill set. But for where the game was at that point in time, what Womack was asking them to do, they were perfect fits. Right now, Ole Miss does not have a lot of perfect fits. They have their best fits on the field. And unfortunately, there's still holes, right? And so, coming back to this Tennessee thing, I don't look out there and think, man, Tennessee's really dynamic at receiver. I don't look out there and think, man, they're great at tailback. They're not great at the offensive line, but they do a really good job with the system. He inherited some good players.
Sure.
He got a couple players to show up via the portal. And so now, yeah, he lost some really good players. We all know Tennessee lost a bunch of players, but I'll say this too. When you're in that locker room and you see a bunch of your boys turning bail on you as a coaching staff, you sit there and you go, man, that just thinned the herd out a little bit. As a player, you sit there and you go, screw them. We can do it. Let's show them. Right. So I think that after that Bowling Green game, you started to see a little bit of resolve develop kind of in the way that they play. And when you watch UCF, when Scott Frost was there, but then after Heupel took over, it's a team that plays with a chip on its shoulder. I worked with a guy that played for both Frost and Heupel. And he's working with Frost now in Nebraska. And him talking about, there's a lot of differences between Frost and Heupel, but his experience with him and the guys that were there after him still under Heupel, he does a good job of understanding where his players are and feeding them what they need to be fed to feel ready to play and to play with that chip on their shoulder and to kind of do some of that stuff. Right.
You see some of that stuff in their videos and stuff. Yeah.
You do. Yeah. I agree. So
got a little edge to their program than they've had in the past couple of years, for sure.
For sure. And early in the season, I was curious. I didn't know if it was going to be there. But talking now, you watch them play and even, a kid that played for me that's been out of the program for a couple of years now, but still knows kids on the team, is still in the Knoxville area. When he talks to people, he still, and I haven't spoken with him this week, but everything he was hearing from people around the program coming through fall camp is everybody felt like this there was a new attitude and a resurgence. You never know how it's going to work until the product is on the field. But I think right now they remind me a lot of what Ole Miss was last year. Right.
Yeah.
From a renewed sense of energy, playing with a bit of a chip on their shoulder. The difference is, Ole Miss was playing last year with a young Matt Corral that did not have all the reps in front of him. Well, now they've got the Booker kid, I believe is his name, that has the reps.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's a lot of interesting things, but like I said, the way they attack, I think that's the big thing to me is going to be, and I know, we talked about it with every game. It's going to be, how do they handle these wide splits and how do they handle the box? And that's the question for Durkin and those guys, going in. And there's not a ton more stuff that I really want to show you, but they do a lot of good things. And again, it comes back to creating those numbers and using splits to create one-on-one matchups. They were able to do it against South Carolina, where again, South Carolina is trying to play a lot of these man-to-man principles. So he's man here, he's man here, he's man on the outside, and they're not afraid to run the quarterback. So they show this quarterback run into the boundary, and what they do, because they force you to commit players to the box because they're going to run the football, is they do a lot of things on the outside where they will create little switches and rub routes where these guys will stack after the ball snapped and switch. So if you're playing man-to-man, it's hard to pass off. If you're playing zone, it can manipulate zone coverages. And these are some of the ways that they take shots. You see this out of everybody. Ole Miss does this. Everybody does this, right? But they do a really good job of finding the right formation to do it. And that's probably where Kiffin and Levy have done such a great job. But you see some of those same traits kind of out of Tennessee. They'll do the same thing where they'll put these three receivers into the boundary. So now, instead of being crazy spread out, they condense everybody, right? Well, now they're going to do the same thing. And then they scored on this against South Carolina. They took these two guys now and they switched them. So he became the inside receiver after the snap. He became the outside receiver. They put him to the opposite hash, and then they released the tight end on this little corner route here. Well, if you catch teams playing a man-to-man defense, which some teams will do when you put three receivers into the boundary like that, this natural rub right here puts a lot of stress on the defenders to play a man-to-man coverage. The other thing that you see a ton of defenses do when you put three receivers into the boundary is they get into some type of a cover three check, okay? When they do that, they do it because it gives them an immediate flat player to help protect against fast screens. Typically, it gives you some type of an overhang player. So again, you're building numbers to the flat in case you need it, but you're also safe over the top. Well, it's hard to be safe over the top with two defenders when they have just divided you now with three receivers.
Yeah.
Right.
Somebody's going to be open.
Somebody's going to come free.
Yeah.
And so against South Carolina, they put those three into the boundary. And so what South Carolina tries to do, they walk this corner up and they play man-to-man right here. This safety played off. This safety played off. So when he went inside and went vertical and he ran this little wheel route, well, this safety left to take him, and the route, it just, the stem of the route and the vertical seam of the route left this corner in a trail position. And again, because it was man-to-man and he's playing this crossing route, the safety's out of there now. So they got the one-on-one that they wanted right there, and they hit the ball right down the seam for an explosive. So, again, if I'm watching the game on Saturday and I'm paying attention to what UCF is doing on offense, the three things, if I'm a fan at home, is one, the tempo. How fast are they going? Two, are the splits really wide or are they really tight? They love putting multiple guys into the short side of the field, and they got all sorts of little games they can play. But when they're really clicking, they're going to get those guys out really wide too. And the question becomes, how is Ole Miss going to respond to both the super wide splits, and then how are they going to respond when they put those numbers into the boundary? Because everything they're doing when they do that is two things. They have two things they're looking at. One, do I gain an advantage in the run game? And two, is it a coverage I can take a shot? Because at the end of the day, if Tennessee can tempo you, run the football, and take shots, it's where they want to be.
Yeah, that's how they keep the crowd in the game. That's how they keep pressure on Corral, pressure on Ole Miss. Yeah, the way Ole Miss takes the pressure off is that you get some stops, you build a lead, you get them out of that game plan, and you get them chasing points. And
the funny thing to me that kind of as I'm watching this stuff is if I'm either of these offensive coordinators, I have to spend a split second thinking, do I slow down? Do I try to keep my defense off the field? Do I take my time? But that gets you out of who you are, right?
No, I especially if I'm Ole Miss,
Yeah.
I go as fast as I can. I want to score. I want to score. I want to put pressure on Tennessee. Hey, you guys have to score now. You have to, there's pressure on you because it's like a tennis match at that point. If you break serve,
at some point, the team that gets 2 stops in a row is probably the team that wins the ball game, right? If you can get back-to-back stops, and then not turn around and give up back-to-back stops shortly thereafter. Whether that happens in the first quarter or the third quarter or the fourth quarter, doesn't matter, right? Because, like I said, if the over-under is 80, I have zero hesitation hammering it, the over, because I don't see a world where I haven't checked the weather, but I don't see a world where these teams aren't scoring points.
Who you like in the end?
I like Ole Miss. I do. I kept going back to how Missouri was able to move the ball. And Missouri's not been a great football team. They've been better offensively than they have defensively.
Yeah.
But Missouri had success moving the ball. I think Ole Miss can run the ball on them, particularly if they're healthy, both up front and in the backfield. And if Corral can continue to play the kind of ball that he's played and keep, McCullough and some of those guys that Tennessee's got in the secondary from getting their hands on the ball, Ole Miss has the ability to go consistently move the ball and score points against them.
Pete, as always, it's a lot of fun. Appreciate the time.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.
We'll talk to you next week. It'll be Ole Miss.
Sir.
And, who knows who'll be the head coach at LSU, but somebody will be over there, and we'll talk about it.
Sounds good.
That was Pete DeWeese. Always thanks for his time here on the MPW Digital Pregame Show. Great insight on Ole Miss and Tennessee. Talked more about Ole Miss and Tennessee, but took a little bit of a tour around the SEC, as we always do, heading into a week's slate of games. You got Auburn at Arkansas, Florida at LSU, Texas A&M at Missouri, Kentucky at Georgia, Vanderbilt at South Carolina, Alabama at Mississippi State, and, of course, Ole Miss and Tennessee. We kind of touch on all of those games. Ed Orgeron's situation at LSU, what happened with Alabama last week in College Station, and more with Ryan Brown of The Next Round. Here is Ryan. Ryan Brown of The Next Round joins us, as he always does here on the MPW Digital Pregame Show. Ryan, we'll start here. Alabama loses a football game, which I know is front page news when it happens. Alabama loses. What happened, and what's been the sort of the response all week?
I think the response is probably about what you would have imagined. People pick apart everything in a loss. Look, in this state, honestly, people pick apart everything in a win. There are a lot of times Alabama and Auburn when they've really got it cooking, but Alabama over the last 2 decades where they won football games that, 99% of the rest of the schools in America would celebrate over. Yet you get the callers to say, yeah, I know we won, but, we didn't do this well, didn't do that well. I don't like this play calling. I don't like that play calling, this assistant, this player, whatever. But in a loss, man, it gets ratcheted up. And unfortunately for Alabama is they gave people that want to do that all the ammunition they needed. Alabama, and this doesn't happen, really, I can't remember a time, Neal, where it's happened to this degree in the Nick Saban era. Since he really got it cooking. I mean, take 2007 off the boards. Since he really got it cooking. That Alabama has had a complete failure in every single aspect of the game. They have busted coverages defensively. Young got sacked offensively. He threw an interception. They ran the ball pretty effectively. And that's the one thing you look at and say, yeah, they ran the ball well enough to win. They gave up a kickoff return for a touchdown in special teams. Everything went wrong. Really, the only area of the game where you would say Alabama didn't have a failure was punt block. They blocked a punt for a touchdown. And field goal. Will Reichard continued to make everything you looked at. So other than that, it was a complete failure in just about every aspect of the game for Alabama. Then you add to it, Neal, where Alabama fans are already after Pete Golding. They don't like him to begin with. And, Alabama's defense looked lost and confused for a lot of that game. And then you got Bill O'Brien, first and goal from the 3, and he throws 3 straight times. They have to settle for a field goal. And those are the things that Alabama fans hate. When you say by throwing it 3 times, I don't think we're physical enough, man enough to run it in on Texas A&M. That's what Alabama fans really, really hate.
So we've had this question a little bit here this week. It's still early in the season, but everybody's played 2 or 3 games, and now everybody in the division has lost a game. It's Alabama's still the favorite. There's no doubt about that. But we've seen them almost lose at Florida. Now we've seen them lose at Texas A&M. They still got to go to Auburn. They go to Mississippi State on Saturday. I don't really know what Mississippi State is or isn't right now. I really don't.
Who knows? Yeah.
When you look at this Alabama team, do you go, okay, I think they're going to run the table all the way to Georgia, or do you say, you know what, the West might be up for grabs right now?
I mean, I think it's more up for grabs than it normally is. This is in a lot of ways not vintage Alabama, but a lot of ways only Alabama. That the game you lose really didn't hurt you that much, honestly, because A&M's already got the 2 conference losses. Had you told me in the preseason Alabama goes to College Station and loses to Texas A&M, I would have said, well, A&M's in Atlanta.
Yeah.
That puts Jimbo in Atlanta, because I never envisioned A&M losing 2 conference games that weren't Alabama, right? And, so in a lot of ways, Alabama kind of that's the one loss you can handle. Had Alabama lost to Ole Miss last week, now Ole Miss has got to find 2 losses somewhere. And I think Alabama fans, had they lost that game, would have said, I think Ole Miss goes to Atlanta. If Alabama, even losing to State, though, Neal, I don't think anybody thinks State's going to win the rest of their games if they beat Alabama.
No, I don't either. It's why I've told people here this week when they're like, I hope Alabama kicks Mississippi State's butt. And I'm like, well, if you're hoping for Ole Miss to go to Atlanta, if that's the goal, then you should be cheering for State this weekend. Absolutely, because the odds of State losing games late are higher than the odds of Ole Miss losing games late. And obviously, if you're Ole Miss, you still get Mississippi State later. You don't get to go back and play Alabama again. It doesn't work like that. So you have to have outside help against Alabama because you've already lost your chance to beat them.
Yeah, that's right. And so is Alabama going to lose to State? I don't think they will. And then you look at the rest of the games on that schedule, Tennessee, and I know we'll talk more about Tennessee because they play Ole Miss, but, look, it's Heupel has got them headed in the right direction. But you got to tap the brakes and remember it's been Missouri and South Carolina, okay? That's 2 of the worst. Missouri, Vandy, and South Carolina are probably the 3 worst teams in the league. Though I do kind of like Missouri plus the 8.5 against Texas A&M Saturday.
Okay.
By the way, having said that. And I am fascinated. I can't wait to talk about this Tennessee Ole Miss game because I am fascinated by this game. Alabama's got LSU left. LSU is a complete and total mess right now. And Alabama will beat them by any score they want to beat them by. And Bryant Denny, I'm not even sure Ed Orgeron will be the coach for that game.
I'm not sure that of their next 4 games that those 4 teams won't beat. And I mean, I'm including Florida, Ole Miss, and Arkansas here. I'm not convinced all 4 of the teams you just mentioned, including Alabama, won't be able to essentially name their score.
Yeah, I don't know how many of those games that Orgeron coaches.
I don't either.
Yeah, and Arkansas may be the best team Alabama has left. You see Arkansas coming to Bryant-Denny Stadium and beating Alabama. I mean, when you look at Arkansas versus Georgia, does that look like a team that can come to Bryant-Denny and beat Alabama if Alabama's awake and engaged for that game? And then Auburn has had their struggles. So if you look at the remainder of Alabama's slate, there's not that team that jumps out that you say, there's the team. That's the team that can give Alabama that second loss that they would have to have. And then that requires the rest of the conference, that requires Ole Miss to run the table. If Ole Miss wants to go to Atlanta, they can't finish in a tie with Alabama unless it's some weird 3 or 4 team tie where they win the tiebreaker.
Let's get into some of these games this weekend. We'll start with Ole Miss and Tennessee. It's obviously a fascinating game. I hope you're wearing track shoes while you answer this question because it's going to the 2 teams that love to go fast, 2 teams that offensively score a lot of points. There they are, the track shoes.
I don't know if those are track shoes.
Yeah, but they're good enough. 2 teams that love to go fast, 2 teams that love to run the football, that run it better than people give them credit for, and 2 teams that defensively it's kind of shaky sometimes. So what do you expect?
So I just took this in my office. I had it right here in the studio for the show. I'm going to try to do it off the top of my head. I compared these 2 teams today. We do a matchup on Thursday, and my matchup was this game. If you look at their scoring offense, Ole Miss is first in the conference, then it's Alabama, then it's Tennessee. They're separated by like 5 points per game. If you look at rushing touchdowns, both of them have scored 18, so they're identical there. If you look at rushing offense, Ole Miss is 1 in the league, Tennessee is 2 in the league, and nationally they're like 5th and 6th. Then you get to passing offense, and it's totally different. You got Matt Corral, and Tennessee does not have a Matt Corral.
No.
And passing offense is like 310 to 220. I mean, it is a massive gap. And to me, there's the difference in your game, right? I think Ole Miss can run. I think Tennessee can run it with Ole Miss. I think Tennessee, on the rushing side, I think they'll be able to match whatever Ole Miss does. And what is the status of Jerry and Ely? I mean, that's a question mark right now.
I don't know. And quite frankly, he wasn't missed last week at all. Henry Parrish was terrific. Snoop Connor was terrific. Matt Corral was very good running the ball. In some ways, I thought, and this is not fair to Jerrion, but because sometimes Jerrion will have, it takes him a little while to get warmed up, if you will.
Yeah.
And I thought maybe, and again, this is an unfair thing to say, but there was a certain degree of addition by subtraction because Ole Miss had no margin for error offensively. Corral had to be perfect, and he was, because Arkansas was 676 yards of offense. They were very, very good on the offensive side of the football and scored a bunch of points. So you couldn't play around with it. You know what I mean? And so Ely's absence wasn't felt.
Yeah. But to me, I mean, that's the difference in the game is Tennessee's inability to throw the ball consistently, though they have been much better doing it with Hendon Hooker than they were with Joe Milton. There is an obvious quarterback disparity in this game. There's nobody – Josh Heupel would take a Matt Corral and kiss you on the mouth for him. So,
sure.
Though I'm not interested in that trade personally, that is the trade he would make right now. And you don't have that if you're Tennessee. And to me, that's the difference in the game. I do think it'll be up and down. I know the total in Vegas is like 82.5, 83, which is insane for a Southeastern Conference game. But I don't think I could confidently go to the window and take the under in that situation. I think I'd probably, if you put a gun to my head, I think I'd have to go over that number.
Yeah, I think I'm going over. I think Ole Miss scores 49 points or so, and I think Tennessee either is in the
41?
high 30s or gets into the low 40s. I'm with you. I think we're seeing the game the same way. Like Ole Miss, I've got Ole Miss by like 10. I think I was 49-38 or something like that.
I'm fine with that score. I'm telling you though, man, of the entire slate, it's the game I am most excited about Saturday. That Saturday night kick. I think, first of all, Tennessee, the atmosphere at Neyland, you've been to games at Neyland Stadium. When they're cooking, that's one of the great atmospheres of football. And they're back excited and they've sold this place out. And you got this style of football and you got a coach that's trying to build a brand. And you got the coach that is a brand and doesn't, he's going to throw, we've already seen it this year. He's willing to do whatever it takes to score points. That's going to be a fun football game. I cannot wait.
Yeah, I've said this for a while. When people ask me about Ole Miss, I'm like, look, I don't know how good they are or how good they aren't, but they have absolutely become appointment television for people. And like,
no doubt.
The game last week was, that's why. I mean, everyone should pick them up because they play that game. A lot. I mean, they played last year against Bama and Florida and LSU and. That's the game that they play a lot, and they won this one.
Yeah, and for instance, like CBS has got Georgia, Kentucky, and I get wanting to show number one. I mean, that's put Alabama on CBS against a lot of bad teams over the years, is they want to show number one on CBS. I get that. I understand that in the TV industry, and I understand that this game is for the East. I mean, the winner of this game is going to win the East. As crazy as that is with Kentucky being involved, but that's the case. But the better game, if CBS just wanted to show the best game, they would have been showing Tennessee and Ole Miss.
Oh, yeah. The guy in Dubuque would much rather watch that because and we'll switch to this one quickly. I don't – tell me if I'm wrong. I don't see how – and I love Kentucky. I think it's a great story. I was kind of on this summer. I said I thought Kentucky had a real shot to be 6-0 and they went to Athens, and here they are. And so I should be like just, wearing my blue and pumped up, but I know that's not the case. And I don't even think they can cover this line at Georgia.
I mean, it's a tough sell. That's another one of those. If you put a gun to my head and I had to go to the window, I think I got to take Georgia and lay the points. I saw this with Kirby Smart at Alabama for years. These teams would play Alabama and they would try to match Alabama's style. They would come in and they would say, we're going to line up and we're going to run physical with Alabama. And they would get real one-dimensional, which is exactly what Kirby Smart wanted you to do. You played right into his hands when you do that. And this Georgia defense is built that same way. And Kentucky comes to this game one-dimensional. They come prepackaged one-dimensional. As good as, or as much as Liam Cohen has tried to change their stripes offensively, and Will Levis has been a better quarterback than they've had over the years, Neal, they're still 13th in the league in passing offense. They're throwing the ball. I think it's 40 yards per game more than they were last year, 30 yards per game the year before, something like that. They're just not throwing the ball well enough to do this. And when you play a Kirby Smart defense and you come in and Dan Lanning defense, you come in one-dimensional, they got you right where they want you, especially if that one dimension is trying to run the football with them. You're not going to run the football with Georgia. So I'm with you. It is hard for me to see how Kentucky's going to hang in this game any at all.
Yeah, I agree. All right, we'll touch the other ones because I think people love when I go around the SEC with you. Auburn,
yeah,
coming off that loss to Georgia, they were respectable for a while, and then Georgia just suffocated them. Auburn goes to Fayetteville to play an Arkansas team that played a great game in Oxford. They just came up a play short. I know it's a sellout in Arkansas. I was talking to one of my daughters this morning. Everybody's going. It's a super hot ticket. Everybody's getting up early and going to the stadium and all of that stuff. I think it's going to be a great atmosphere in Fayetteville. How do you see that one shaking out?
Well, Auburn has all of a sudden started struggling to run the football, and I don't know if that's just competition or what. They ran it pretty well at Penn State, especially Tank Bigsby, and then Hunter came on. He's a freshman, and he's been really, really good for Auburn as their backup running back. But over the last two games, really going back to the Georgia State game, Tank Bigsby disappeared. He was not on the field at the end of the game when Auburn was making the comeback with TJ Finley in at quarterback. Then Auburn went to Baton Rouge, and the whole focus going to Baton Rouge was, is it going to be TJ Finley starting or is it going to be Bo Nix? And Auburn went with Bo Nix, and it paid off. But what got overshadowed by Bo Nix's performance, by and large, was the fact that Tank Bigsby was a non-factor again. Then last week against Georgia, it's not a huge surprise that, I just talked about how you don't really line up and run it on Georgia most of the time. And Bigsby, again, was a non-factor. So it's a trend now. Now you got 3 consecutive games where Auburn just has not run the ball effectively. So much of their rushing offense is coming from the quarterback position. And so much of that is because he's under duress all the time. I think you saw this with Ole Miss last week. I think it'll be easier to get run yards on them, on Arkansas, than it has been against LSU and against Georgia. So I think that'll help Auburn's run game a little bit. But Bo Nix is not getting any help at all from his offensive line, who has been a sieve, and he's getting zero help from his receivers, who are dropping pass after pass after catchable pass. That is a huge concern for Auburn going into this game. This is a tough game, for me to look at and handicap. I know, when the line came out, I was a little surprised where it was at 4, and then it ballooned up yesterday, and it's come back down a little bit today. So I'm really puzzled by this game. And I do think both of these teams, Sam Pittman coming out of that Texas game, and Arkansas jumped up to what was number 8 in the country.
Yeah.
And there was all this excitement. And then you get smashed by Georgia, and you're able to flesh that out, respect the heck out of the performance they put on in Oxford, but you lose a super emotional game where you expended a lot of energy. And it feels like Arkansas has got to find a win quickly to get that momentum back and get that team back to believing in what Sam Pittman does. 3 straight losses could be so damaging to their season. And Auburn's kind of in the same spot, even though it's not consecutive losses. You get shelled by Georgia. If Auburn, with their remaining schedule, if they go up to Arkansas and lose this game, it's going to be a heck of a job for Brian Harsin to get this team back, still having to play Mississippi State, still having to play Ole Miss, still having to play Alabama. There's some there's some tough games left on that schedule for Auburn.
Yeah, if they lose in Fayetteville, they get a weekend off, and then they got to
find the wins.
Got to play Ole Miss at home. Got to go to Texas A&M. You get Mississippi State at home. You got to go to South Carolina. And everybody goes, well, that's a W, but it'd be easier at home than it would be there. And then you got Alabama coming to town. It can
not a lot of W's there.
And here's the deal about Arkansas, and I don't think people have paid as much attention to this with them. If Arkansas can beat Auburn, they get Pine Bluff next week in Little Rock. That's a win.
Yep.
Then they get an open date, kind of a chance to And then you come back, Mississippi State at home. It's very winnable. You go to LSU, which before the season, everybody would have gone, that's a loss. And now you look at it and go,
it's a win.
That's probably a win. And then you get you got to go to Alabama. That's a loss. And then you come home to play Missouri, and that's a game they could win. And I mean, if you'd offered Sam Pittman truth serum and 9-3, he would have said yes, sir, all day long and signed up. I mean, he'd have been all over that. And I think that's a realistic thing for them. It's a big spot for both teams. We talked about LSU a little bit. Florida goes in there as a 10-point favorite. Man, I think you're going to pick Florida to win the game. Let me give you an over-under.
All right.
57,000 fans.
We talked about it on the show today because and the people that watch this may not remember this specific thing happening, but it involved Alabama, which is why we remember it here. Is when Philip Fulmer got fired, Mike Hamilton publicly said that he was the athletics director at the time, that one of the things that crystallized his decision was the end of the 2008 Alabama-Tennessee game. And he walked down on the field at the end of the game, and the Tennessee fans had left and the Alabama fans had stayed. And he said it wasn't just that there were a lot of Alabama fans there, it was where they were sitting. He looked at scholarship donor seats that had crimson in them and booster seats that had crimson in them. He's like, my biggest supporters are selling their tickets to Alabama fans. And that crystallized his Phil Fulmer decision. And Fulmer got fired shortly after that. I don't think it'll be the same because I don't think Florida will travel that well to Baton Rouge. But when Scott Woodward stands on that field and scans the stadium, if it's 56,000, we estimated like 70 or 75. If it's 56,000.
And when I say 56,000, I don't mean tickets sold. I mean bodies.
No, butts in the seats. Yeah. 11 a.m. kick. A disappointing team where you're losing great player after great player. All your good players aren't playing now. And it's an 11 a.m. kick, which LSU fans, even in the best of times, Neal, they hate those 11 a.m. kicks. And you get 56, 60,000 fans and all those empty seats. That speaks volumes. I mean, that's the type of thing that gets a coach fired when he's struggling. And again, I'll ask, do you want to get – and one of our callers brought this up today. It's a great point. I don't think Orgeron can save this season at all. And I agree with him completely. But can he pull a miracle? If you leave him on and he pulls a miracle somewhere. The caller mentioned Tuscaloosa, and that just seems so remote, but it would be a miracle.
But it's a good point that the caller's making. Go ahead. Because upsets happen. Crazy upsets happen every year in sports. Yeah.
Keep in mind the reason Ed Orgeron has this job is LSU went to Auburn and lost a tight game at the end where, believe it or not, Les Miles mismanaged the clock badly. And they lost a game, and LSU fired him, not because they thought Les Miles was on his way to 6-6, but they thought Les Miles could probably still eke out an 8-4, 9-3. And right now I got the fan base pissed off at him, and I can fire him right now and everybody will applaud me. And I promote Ed Orgeron, and what does he do? He goes 6-2, which tells you probably what Les Miles was going to do if he'd have kept the job. And Orgeron 6-2 gets him this job. It's why he's got the job right now. And that's why everybody says, why fire a guy now? It doesn't really help you in the coaching search. Being in early doesn't necessarily help you. And I don't disagree with that. You fire him because you don't leave him around to screw around and pull off a miracle. And in some weird situation, the fan base sways back into your favor, and now you can't fire the guy.
Because it won't happen, but let's say for kicks and giggles, they beat Florida. Maybe they lose beat Florida, lose to Ole Miss. You give him the open date, and you're on the field the day that Alabama plays the historically bad football game. It happens. 3 fumbles, couple of picks, botched punt, punter drops a ball, doesn't get it off.
Bryce Young gets hurt. I mean, it could be a million different things. Yeah.
Bryce Young gets hurt in the first quarter, and another. Stuff happens. I mean, when people go, well, that could never happen. Well, I'll give you 300 examples of where it has happened.
Exactly.
It's unlikely to happen, but they win that game, and then all of a sudden, they beat Arkansas at home. They beat Louisiana Monroe, and now the fans are back. And that weekend that Texas A&M comes in, and you win this emotional 35-31 game over Jimbo Fisher and them, and now you can't fire him.
I know.
And then you had another year with him, and then next year it fully implodes, and now you're done. So my guess, because it just makes sense, is they lose Saturday, they lose in Oxford, They fire him the day after, and you have an open date to sort through some of it. And then I want to see if Woodward will do the smart thing, which is we're promoting this person to be the head coach. He will not be a candidate.
That's right.
And you pay him an extra.
Don't even leave the door open. Yep.
You pay him an extra $200,000 to come in and run the month. Here's $200,000. You're gonna have a really cool Christmas, but you're not going to be the coach here.
That's right. Yep. And you know, in a certain way, to a certain extent, I thought that's what USC had done with Clay Helton. Like, I think they feared Clay Helton. Now, the way USC has played since, I might be wrong about this, but I think they feared Clay Helton could pull off an 8-4. And he's lost to Stanford. He got blown out in the Coliseum. Everybody's pissed off. Let's strike while the iron's hot, while everybody's mad, and nobody's going to say, I don't know if we should have fired him. You do it when everybody's PO'd. And if they lose to Florida and nobody's in the stands, it's the time to do it. Or if you hold on to them and Kiffin and Ole Miss come in there next week and just, or no, it's in Oxford.
It's in Oxford.
In Oxford next week and run them out of ball at Hemingway. That's a great time to do it. I don't know if you want to let him go to Bryant-Denny Stadium. I don't know. I mean, these are tough calls, but I think, like, to your point where we started this, if it's 56,000 people or somewhere around that in Tiger Stadium Saturday, you're well down the road if you're Scott Woodward, knowing what you've got to do.
Heard a name associated with that LSU job, Mario Cristobal, who I know his name pops up around Alabama circles a little bit as well when people do the who replaces Saban thing. You think Cristobal would leave Oregon for LSU if the money were right?
I would think in a heartbeat, yeah. I mean, to come back to the SEC, get back down south. Look, the guy's a dynamite recruiter. You know that. You follow the recruiting. He is so good recruiting. And look where, you know, even though Oregon is a brand, you go look at Oregon and where they are geographically, and go look at their roster and see how many players he has to go to California to get. That's a long way to go recruit those guys. You don't do that in Baton Rouge. Baton Rouge, you go recruit in the backyard, you dip over into Texas a little bit, maybe grab a guy from Mississippi, you're good to go.
It's the whole Pac-12 SEC thing too right now. The Pac-12 is weak, and the SEC is red hot.
Red hot. And that makes the job a little bit tougher, but it also gives you the stability you need. And he knows he'll get everything he wants at LSU. They will build him whatever he wants. He'll get, in a lot of ways, the Nick Saban treatment that he saw in Tuscaloosa. My hesitation on Mario Cristobal is that I'm not crazy about his Saturday coaching. I've always said I think Cristobal is the guy you want Sunday through Friday. If somebody else could coach the team Saturday, he time and time again, and he did it against Stanford again in that loss in Palo Alto, he'll make critical in-game errors that has cost his team games. And I'm not saying that should keep you from hiring the guy. I think he's the type of guy you like running your program. I'm not 100% sure, though, coaching-wise, Saturdays, he's the best in business.
We mentioned Alabama earlier. Any reservations on your part about this line or the game in Starkville?
I'll tell you what, man, Alabama fans, I don't know if it's just the frustration speaking or what. They don't like Pete Golding in this defense, and I think they're worried about facing the air raid. That said, this defense was probably about the same at this time last year, and that game was a no contest. So I don't know. I think you got the fear that you see this all the time in the history of Mike Leach. He's got that one game where everything clicks. It was LSU last year. Everything clicks, right? And that offense is just dynamic. And everything works, and your defense is confused the whole game. And I think that's what scares Alabama fans, because this defense has been prone to busting assignments. They haven't pressured the quarterback well of late. Will Anderson has done it. He didn't do it against Texas A&M. You don't really pressure the quarterback in these air raid systems. I personally believe Alabama will be able to line up and run what they want to run offensively, and that's why this is not a game. 17 feels a little bit high. Or whatever it is right now. I think Alabama by 10-14. Here's what I'll say, though, Neal. If Alabama doesn't come out and win this game fairly convincingly, and by that I mean 14, 21, 24 points, I'm worried about this team. Because historically, Alabama has not lost back-to-back games since 2007 in the regular season. And historically, when Alabama has had a performance like they had Saturday night in College Station, that next performance is a dominant performance. And if Nick Saban can't get this team to do that, that probably shows you something about the constitution of this team.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons I'm really curious about it. Not like this last one, though. I saved the best for last. I mean, this Vanderbilt South Carolina game, man. I mean, How much?
We're all winners in that one.
We're all winners. How much would someone have to pay you to give up your entire weekend to go to Columbia and sit through that one?
Boy, it'd be better for in Nashville because it's a great town. And I know slight to Columbia, but it's no Nashville. Boy, I'd have to get a lot of money for that. That's a tough one to watch right there. And believe it or not, it was the morbid side of me. A couple Saturday nights ago, I flipped over to Vandy, Yukon just to see what it looked like.
And we stayed on it. We were doing our post-game show, and I guess Chase had bet on the game or something, and so we had it on TV too. And there are like 4 great games going on, and we're sitting here glued to Vanderbilt in Connecticut. And in my mind, I'm like, I can't stop watching. I know. I couldn't stop looking. We even finished the show, and I came back in here and watched the end of the game and wondered what the hell was wrong with me. So you're not alone.
Yeah, I happened to be watching when Vandy scored, and the guy that has the big flag, I know you've seen it, runs between the goalpost and the field while they're trying to kick the extra point. I'm like, they've got no practice. They don't know how to do that. Like, give him a break.
Yeah, he wasn't prepared for that. I mean, just look at the Florida game.
He hasn't done it.
We don't score. And I totally forgive him for that. I mean, it'd be one thing if his team was, like Ole Miss or Arkansas last weekend, where you're like, hey, man, you hadn't figured this out by now, but they score like 2 touchdowns a year. I mean, it's confusing.
That's right. That's
right. Thanks for the time, as always. Really appreciate it. And I'm sure you're getting up early Sunday to watch your Dolphins in the big London game.
My gosh, I hate those. I'm already predisposed to hate those. I'm going to go to church and do something good rather than spend my time watching this team is playing awful right now. Thank God Tua's back though, and hopefully he stays healthy, and him coming back will spark this team. But they have played awful football under Jacoby Brissett. Awful.
Yeah, they don't look good.
Well,
hey, thanks for
at least they're getting the Jags, and not that anybody liked the John Gruden story, but Urban Meyer probably didn't mind it.
No, Urban Meyer was the one guy that was like, "Oh, thank God for that."
Yes, I hate what he did, but thank God it was him. Yes.
Yeah. All right, buddy. I appreciate you.
All right, guys. Thanks.
Bye. Always fun to visit with Ryan Brown. Good stuff about the SEC. We talked a little bit more SEC, a lot of Ole Miss, Tennessee, and kind of talked some national college football scene as we typically do each week with Jeffrey Wright of 92.9 ESPN in Memphis. Talked to Jeffrey late Wednesday. Here's that conversation. Think you'll enjoy it. Jeffrey Wright, 92.9 ESPN in Memphis, joins again as we start to get ready for Ole Miss and Tennessee Saturday night, 6:30 Central, 7:30 Eastern there at Neyland Stadium in Knoxville. Jeffrey, how are you?
Man, I'm well. It's kind of fun being, covering big games again. I mean, I know we use the term covering, but I mean, you know what I mean? Like it's,
sure.
I've made my fair share of Vols are back jokes, but I do prefer them to at least be interesting. And I think they're interesting. And I think it's really cool that, you can add the Kiffin factor, whatnot, but the fact that this game's a sellout and the fact that this game is interesting, I think that's cool.
Oh, I do too. I think it's cool. They're doing the checkerboard thing and lots of people. It's going to be packed. It's going to be loud. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be a Heisman candidate on the road in what I think figures to be a shootout. You can't help but notice how many points Tennessee has scored the last couple of weeks. And everybody goes, well, that's Missouri and that's South Carolina. And granted, I understand. On the flip side, you can't help but forget, Ole Miss won the game. Lane Kiffin, to his everlasting credit, Jeffrey, on Monday, made a point of saying, we're having a different discussion if one play is different. One play in a 3.5-hour football game where there was, Arkansas had 95 snaps, and Ole Miss had, I can't remember exactly how many, let's call it 80, just for the sake of a round number.
Ole Miss did have significantly fewer snaps.
It was in the upper 70s, I think.
Basically, the game, yards per play was very, almost dead even. I think Arkansas had a little bit of advantage because Arkansas, they turned it over and they missed a field goal.
Yeah, but let's just say 95 and 75, so that's 170 plays. If you change one play at the end of the game, if Arkansas runs a different play or if somehow Jefferson completes that pass, we're having a different conversation. Lane was pointing that out, and I say that to say this. So you can't completely forget that, yes, Tennessee's rolling up points and yards against bad teams, but at least at this point, it's conceivable that you have to ask the question, is the Ole Miss defense bad? Because if it is, well, then Tennessee's going to roll up points and yards again, and we're going to have ourselves a shootout Saturday night.
Yeah, I just pulled up the box score from Saturday. Total plays 93-70.
Okay.
Yards per play, Ole Miss was 8.7 and Arkansas was 7.3. So, I totally agree with you, and I agree with Lane that, if that one play goes differently, this is a very different discussion. But I mean, how many times can you do, correct me if I'm wrong, the penalty, the second down play to Drummond when Ole Miss got the ball back with 3 minutes left, was that a hold or was that a illegal man downfield?
That was Cedric Melton. There was no one to block, and he kind of kept drifting. And so he got 10 yards down the field. It was the right call.
Oh, I'm not, but
yeah, sure.
No. Oh, I'm.
But if you take that play away, the game's over and they win by a touchdown.
But more importantly, this has been something that I get furious in college football. That play doesn't get called. That play does not get called 1,000 times out of 1,000. The problem, the unfortunate reality is the linesman that made the call was standing right next to the Arkansas bench.
And they pointed it. They were screaming.
Right. And for the record, it's a penalty.
Sure.
I don't want anyone. I'm the guy that, even though I'm an offensive guy by, in my heart, I think if it's a rule, it's a rule. Start calling it. There should be an official that is, all he does is go up and down the sideline and watch that, in my opinion. But
as a former defensive guy, I watch the RPO game and go, okay, yeah, I get it. Because the argument is that. Well,
if you're, think about this, because you're also a safety. Isn't key number one what is the front doing?
Yeah, and so if a lineman is 8 yards downfield, I'm going run. It's a run play. I need. Yeah, so
I got to get my ass up there.
I mean, step one as a safety is run pass.
Yes,
run pass. And so if a lineman is 8 yards down the field, well, it's a run, and so I'm coming up, and that's an unfair advantage. And so as a person who once played defense back in the Stone Age, when that kind of thing didn't happen, I look at it to myself and think, if you allow that to happen, you are basically making defense impossible.
Correct.
In fairness to Nick Saban, that's what he said years ago, is if you don't crack down on this, you're changing fundamentally the game.
Well, and to be fair to Saban, and I know everyone thinks he's whining because he couldn't stop it. No, I mean, now he's the one doing it. He's the one saying, let's do it. But to his point, they don't allow this in the NFL.
No.
And I know we can do the NFL's not college, but there's a reason why they don't allow it. Well, first off, at that level, somebody would get killed.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes. And would never get a stop.
Correct. At that level, but
literally never once get a stop.
But I don't know. I felt like through the course of the game, I felt like those two teams, I thought probably if you were going best 22 versus best 22 that were available that day. So I'm saying everyone could do our guys are hurt. Well, yeah, but I'm saying on that day, best 22 versus best 22, I thought Arkansas probably had more guys, but I thought there was one big glaring difference. I mean, Matt Corral was unbelievable.
Yeah.
I mean, that was otherworldly. And think about this. KJ Jefferson played well.
Oh, really well.
He didn't obviously play a perfect game, but that's not a perfect quarterback. But in terms of, if you would have said to Pittman before the game, hey man, I'll let your guy go 25 of 35 for 326, 3 scores and a pick, and I'm also going to let him run for another 85. I think Sam Pittman would have said,
oh, and then if you had told him, and the pick's going to be just a desperation throw at the end.
Correct. The pick is at the end of the half. Yeah. He would have said, cool, what do we win by?
He would have turned the jukebox on.
Sure. And
he would have got a win. Yeah. And the only reason that didn't happen was because number 2 is off the charts special. Those deep balls that he threw are things.
Handoffs.
They're unbelievable.
he placed the ball in Breland Sanders' hands 65 yards down the field.
It's unreal. There aren't.
I mean,
How many guys in the NFL can make that throw? 8?
Rodgers. So off the top of my head, Brady, Rodgers, Burrow,
Herbert,
if it's to the outside.
Prescott.
That's not what Dak where Dak is lethal is intermediate. Dak is a lethal, like, intermediate seam guy. I'm not convinced that would be one he make. And for the record, I think Dak's playing
He's
phenomenal football.
MVP level.
Like I've watched every one of their games, and obviously my team played them on Sunday, and every time they get the ball, it's terrifying. Like, you just assume, like, oh my God, like I have no idea like what we're going to do to stop them. I mean, we're talking somewhere between 5 and 8, probably.
Yeah.
Mahomes obviously can make that throw. I think Baker can. And, I think Lawrence can make that throw, but, I mean, like, he's dealing with, an idiotic offensive scheme and a guy that sits there and goes, like, of all the Urban Meyer talk, the thing that was the most absurd to me was the most alarming comment he has made is, well, it's like you play Alabama every week and you're expected to win. Yeah. Wait, what did you do zero vetting? Like, did you holy hell, man. Like, did he this is the reality of the situation. When everyone wants to do these mythologizing of these coaches, this individual is so stupid. And that is the appropriate word, stupid, that he took a job thinking, I'm just going to go in there and I'm going to culture it up. And I'm going to culture it up. I'm going to draft guys that I recruited because those are the only ones I know. I don't actually want to do the hard work. And then I'm going to tell everyone how we do it around here. All right, buddy. Congratulations. That's where we are. But, the whole point, though, the whole reason I bring up all that is we can do the one play thing. We can. I'm also someone that believes that though Ole Miss thoroughly got their ass kicked in Tuscaloosa, I still think if you forget the going for it on 4th down, say Jerry Neely, like I said, when we talked, I don't know if it was last week or after the show, if he just dives on 3rd down and gets a first down, Ole Miss has got 4 fresh downs to score from the 3. I like their chances.
Yeah, and 7-0 Ole Miss at the beginning of that game is, who knows? It's perhaps a different game.
And like we said, so I just think that's kind of the bigger picture for me is we love, and it's part of the sport. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's the whole, it's an overreaction sport in general, but it's where you realize the margins are still thin. It's not as thin as it is in the NFL, but the margins between 10-2 and 7-5 is nowhere near as wide as everyone thinks. Like, in the end, I got news for everyone. If you're just chalking it up thinking State's a win, if you're chalking it up thinking LSU's a win, well, maybe not that one, but this week, A&M, and you know what I mean?
So I want to get to some of those teams in a minute. I want to let's dial in on Tennessee though for a second. Do you expect a shootout?
Part of me says, how can it not be? In the end, these are the two offenses that run at the fastest pace. I mean, I don't know if week to week it levels out, but in general, these two teams run plays at roughly 13 or 14 seconds per clip. And that's the fastest. So part of me says, how can this not be a shootout? But then there's also the other aspect of it. We know Ole Miss gets into shootouts, but most of the time when they get into a shootout, it's kind of an unexpected shootout and it develops into it. Last week was the perfect example. If you think about that first quarter, think about the pace in the first quarter. It was kind of all right, let's feel it out. Let's feel it out. Now, I also think there's an explanation for why that game became kind of what it did. Both teams offensively were saying, all right, they're going into the belly of the beast, and they were they were ramming the wall, and they were ramming the wall to loosen it up so that then they could do what they wanted to do, which is attack the outside and attack downfield. And if you notice, both teams did it. It just looked a little different. Yeah. Whereas, Ole Miss did it with a little bit more like precision, and it felt like Arkansas was just kind of throwing it up. Well, in the end, Arkansas, you can say they were just throwing it up, but they knew they had their best player one-on-one against a 5'9" corner.
Yep.
That's not really a bad football play. And that's not really that lucky of a result. Like they played smart football in my mind, but these teams are exactly the same. And I just keep wondering, like, we thought certain games are going to be shootouts, and then they kind of ended up being, played in the high 20s, low 30s. I just don't know how either team gets enough stops, but I can see where I thought it was telling to see Kippen's reaction when you want to talk about everything. I do think he knows I've got to protect this defense. I think unlike last year, I think he knew there was only one way to win. Like, I literally just have to go out there and outscore them. There's no chance of stops. While this defense isn't good by any stretch of the imagination, they are better. And if you think back in the first half, and even in the second half, they got stops.
Yeah.
Like, I thought one of the biggest moments of the game was after Ole Miss went for it on 4th and short, was it like the 33?
31, 32, 33 in there somewhere. Sure. And Ole Miss at the time was, I guess they were up 7, or no, they were.
Yeah, I can't remember if they were up 7 or if it was, maybe they were up.
Oh, they were up 3.
They were up 3 and they hold to a field goal, tie game. That's a stop. Like, you give a team the ball at the plus 30, that's a stop if they only leave with 3 points. And truth be told, like, for all the knocks, like, I did think this is one place where Kiffin was wrong. His defense got him a stop up 7 and said, here's the ball.
And they couldn't do anything with it. Yeah, that was a big moment. Sure.
So, like, when you go back throughout the course of the game, like, I do feel like the team that, when I was watching most of the game, I felt like the team that had the advantage for the majority of the game, I felt like they won.
I did too.
Now, it obviously was. Sorry.
I thought the better team won. It was close.
Yeah.
It was close and really close. And I don't think they're that much better than Arkansas.
No, but like, also, let's also give some credit to Arkansas.
Sure.
McElroy, and I don't remember if it was Katie George, or maybe she did the interview or whatnot, but they laid out Arkansas's game plan. Arkansas's game plan is, we're going to run at him, and we're going to wear him down. Well, they had 90 plays.
It basically worked.
Like, give them credit. They executed their plan. Like I don't know.
If I'm Sam Pittman, I walk out of that stadium going, you know what? We had a plan. We executed the plan. We lost today. And maybe this is a little rationalization on his part. We lost today because the best player in the country was the quarterback on the other sideline.
I also thought he made the right call.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like, I didn't get to watch the whole post game, but the one thing I 100% agreed with you was they had one play to make sure Matt Corral never got the ball again.
Yeah. And it was going to come down to a 2-point play anyway, so go ahead and run your play. And it didn't work. And sometimes this is process and results. Sometimes the process doesn't bring the right result, but the following the process typically will. And I thought for them, they had a plan. They knew what they wanted to do. But as that drive unfolded, he said, if we score, we're going for 2. They did. And had they gotten it, it's a giant, dramatic, oh my gosh, win. And when you lose like that, you get off the field and get ready for Auburn.
This was the one thing, though, that Kippen said that it personally rubbed me the wrong way. I 1,000% disagree that Ole Miss didn't do anything on that play. Like he kind of made it seem like they just didn't get it.
No, Sam Williams made a big play.
They ran at it.
Yeah.
And they took, now in fairness, they'd seen the play. Like that was one of the plays that they had scored a touchdown. But it's, first off, like just because you've seen the play doesn't mean, they ran 2 guys at him and they forced him to make a quick decision.
And Reese picked up Burks in coverage.
Exactly.
And Chance Campbell fooled KJ with his eyes. And Ole Miss
the backside end came underneath and took away the shovel.
Yeah, because 20 was going to be a target for the shovel.
Correct.
And when KJ looked briefly, it wasn't there. And then by the time, and he never had a chance to look again because of coverage.
That is kind of the one thing that I'm noticing. I'm kind of keeping an eye on this. I think Kiffin's developing this narrative of that our offense is unstoppable and, our defense is awful. And I don't necessarily agree. Don't get me wrong.
So if you're Ole Miss this week, what do you do with Tennessee? Because this is not.
I think you do.
I mean, Hooker's a little different player than Jefferson.
I think you watch a lot of South Carolina film from the second half, and I think you do a lot of what you did to KJ Jefferson that we're talking about at the end. I think it's a lot of maybe not necessarily like show blitz, but it's a lot of as soon as you see him take off, crash hard, sell out. And yeah, maybe someone beats you over the top, but I think their new formula has to be, we've got to find ways to create negative plays. Sure, we're going to get gashed, but the best way I think to control the game for them is I think they can control it on offense. And so I think if you're going to talk about what is their best formula, I think their best formula is use the speed they have on defense, create negative plays that way. Sure, you're going to leave some guys in coverage, but I would rather leave. I think they're better off leaving a corner or safety one-on-one than they are leaving a linebacker one-on-one. Like that was the thing that was very noticeable to me in the second half. Like Arkansas just found ways to pick at Ole Miss's linebackers the entire time.
Well, that's why I'm interested to see what happens on the other side, because I don't think Tennessee can do much against Matt Corral. I don't think there's a lot of, they're counting on noise and they're counting on a lot of those things being factors, but on the actual field, I think Corral can have a field day.
Yeah, I mean, I will say in fairness, like devil's advocate, we both kind of thought the same when they went to Alabama.
Yeah. But
so I guess the question is how much I don't know, man. Like this is the question that I have. How much of that was Alabama and how much of that was Ole Miss just not playing well? And like, if you think about it, okay, let's look at where they were most deficient in that game. Offensive line and the interior of the offensive line. Well, what's the one group that's the most dependent on communication?
Offensive line, yeah. And they didn't do a very good job of it.
And then penalties and whatnot. So I don't want to like totally dismiss that, but to act as if Tennessee can replicate the same game plan. I think the reality of the situation is there are probably 3 or 4 defenses nationally that can make Ole Miss uncomfortable.
Yeah, I think that's probably true.
I think Georgia would like their chances. I
think Georgia would. Iowa would present some problems because of how physical they are and how disciplined they are.
Well, and they eat up the short passing game to soften it. They eat that up, and then they don't get beat deep.
All right, I want to get, while we have some time, I want to get into the other thing I wanted to get into you with. Texas A&M beats Alabama, and it wasn't fluky. I don't know how much of it you watched. It was
every snap.
It was domination at the line of scrimmage, almost from start to finish. I thought Elko had a great plan, all those things. But here's the question moving forward. So Alabama's played 3 conference games now, right? They barely beat Florida. They beat Ole Miss pretty good. And then they get beat by Texas A&M. Yet everyone still goes, well, Alabama's going to be in the Final Four. Alabama's going to make the thing. Alabama's going to go to the SEC championship.
I disagree, but continue.
Yeah, and that's where I was going to go. So I look at it now and go, well, now wait a minute. Ole Miss is pretty good. A&M can be pretty good. Auburn's weird. Arkansas is kind of weird. LSU sucks. And I'm not
Well,
sure.
LSU's quit. There's a different, you know what I mean? Like,
But they're going to finish 7th.
but without Keyshawn Butte, like I don't.
Yeah, well, and
Max Johnson just runs for his life and goes, "Where the hell is he?" And then tries to throw it to him. And by the way, that sucked because that guy's great to watch.
Mississippi State's good on defense, and
they're getting better on offense, no matter what anyone wants to.
So
here's my reps, whatnot. Yeah.
Here's my question: if you had to look into your crystal ball, how many losses does Alabama have when they leave Jordan-Hare at the end of November?
So this is where I'm torn. Coming into the season, it had all of the vibes of the 10-3, whatever, 9-3 Citrus Bowl Alabama year. And then Saban uses this for the next run. This is where he uses that bowl practice period to kind of purge the program. But the one hang up I always had is, unlike those other years, they were replenished with more talent than we've seen a lot of times. It's not a perfect team by any stretch of the imagination, but it's still a very good team. The problem that I see with this team is I think it is less about, I think this team is, I mean, it's tough to say with the worst, the best coach in the country, but I think they're poorly coached right now, at least on offense. On defense, I think on defense, there is a little bit of, particularly at linebacker, I think there's a side speed ratio issue. Like, I think they brought Toa Toa in for a reason. And, he's a good player, but he's not a perfect player. And Anderson can't make every play. Like, I do think at linebacker, they're not perfect there. I still think the front's pretty good. And I think their back end's pretty good. But the thing about them that you noticed, like last week, how many times would Texas A&M load up one side, make you think they were blitzing and overloading that side, only to have that side drop and then blitz from the other side? And every single time, now granted, I give Texas A&M all the credit in the world. They clearly, I don't know what game they watched. I don't know if it was the Florida game. I don't know, but they clearly watched some game that said, oh, this screws with them. That they saw someone try and overload and then blitz from the other, zone blitz from the other side and not pick it up. Because multiple times A&M was getting through when Alabama had the numbers up front to block it. And so, I don't feel 1,000% confident saying it wasn't an RPO, but it looked like to me when they showed it from the all 22, he was turning the protection. He was turning the protection to the direction that he thought the blitz was coming from. They would come from the backside, and then it was game over because they just had a numbers overload. Now, in fairness to every Alabama coach that I'm sure is watching and listening and loving, there is also the reality of it could have been an RPO and that the line's blocking that way and they leave a gap because they were supposed to be reading someone and there was missed assignments. So it's entirely possible. I still think, though, new offensive line coach, new offensive coordinator, young quarterback, younger offensive line, like an offensive line that hasn't played as much together. And I still think it's what I told you a couple of weeks ago. And part of me is like, is this kind of validating for me and you? Like, we watched that Alabama team against Florida and we're like, they're gettable. Like, they're not and we never said like, oh my God, this is a 6-loss team or 5-loss team, but it's like, they're gettable. But then when they did what they did to Ole Miss, and then I'd watched Calzada for 3 games, more importantly, Jimbo installed a new offense. So it begs one of 2 questions. Did they lose the Mississippi State game because they had already started working on Bama? and they didn't want to pull any of the wrinkles out because I'm telling you, that was he ran lots of RPO and Jimbo, Jimbo thinks that's cheating. Like Jimbo hates it.
But I think it's what this kid does well.
Well, it is, but that like in the end, like that's why he looked like that's the question for me. Did he just have the Bo Wallace in Oxford game? And granted, Bo had better game.
He's got a big arm, man. I mean, the dude can really spin it. And they finally just kind of let him throw it, knowing that there's going to be some bad reads. There's going to be some bad mistakes. And then he got hot.
What they really let him do is they let him throw it, and they didn't ask him to go post, dig, dump. You know, it was either one-on-one to the outside, work your guy. It was really fast running back on linebacker.
Yeah.
To the flat. It was quicker stuff.
They let him get confidence. And by the end of the game, he believed he was going to go do it, and he did it.
And he still had the Calzada pick, like that pick at the half. You know what I mean? Like he still had, but that's the thing. That was the same thing where that was when he rolled outside the pocket and he got into trouble. But
so who can get him? Can Mississippi State get him?
Maybe. That defense is
too. I mean, I think Alabama's going to win.
That defense is going to confuse them. Also, I mean, I don't know. They're going to ring responsibly.
It's going to get loud, especially if the game can get going. That place gets loud.
And on top of that, like, how do you neutralize their pass rush? Unlike Kiffin, Leach is not going to. Leach understands you have to control the ball. Like, that's the whole thing about the air raid. Everyone thinks of it just because you throw it 60-something times. They control the clock with a short passing game. Like, that's how they do it. But are you telling me that, like, if you look at where State's best, it's guys that can pick on those linebackers? But really what it boils down to for me is I think their defensive alignment can give them some problems. But the question for me is, was this we've been discussing, like, I don't see Alabama. I don't know if Alabama doesn't know what it is, or if Alabama panicked a little bit, or maybe they can't do what they want to do. But like, it made no sense to me why they stopped running Robinson.
First goal at the 5 and the 3 pass plays. It was mind-boggling.
And I know and like, the truth is, how much are we talking about this if the tight end holds on to the football? Like, I don't know. Like, that's kind of like my larger like point is that we can do this whole Jimbo, Jimbo's now like, most overpaid guy. Well, it didn't look like he was overpaid on Saturday. Like, it just shows that the margins are just very, very thin. But to me, the biggest problem I see with Alabama is they can't really run it down. Either they don't think they can run it down your throat, or they believe that their best path to winning is what they've been doing. And in fairness, they had some drops on Saturday night.
Well, they've had drops all year.
I mean,
all right. So let me get your thoughts on some games real quick.
Final answer, I'll say 2. I say someone gets them again. I don't know who it's going to be.
For some reason, I think Auburn gets them at the end. Speaking of Auburn and Arkansas, and go quick here, but just kind of your quick thoughts, Auburn at Arkansas.
Sam Pittman returning to home after a month. My boy's 14-4 against the spread. Why the hell would I pick against him?
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way. I like it. It's over for LSU.
Also, I think Auburn. Now let's give Auburn some credit. They did score on Georgia.
They did.
They scored on Georgia, but I also think that game beat the hell out of them.
Georgia's the most physical team. Like, Kentucky is so lucky as we go into that game. Kentucky gets a free shot, and if it goes terribly, you get to go home and kind of lick your wounds and heal a little bit mentally, because you get an open date, and then the rest of their schedule is winnable. I mean, you can go get wins the rest of the way. Kentucky could easily go 10-2 and go to the Citrus Bowl or something and call it the greatest season ever. And
Citrus, Hell, they might go to the Sugar Bowl 10-2.
I know. Any shot at all for them against Kentucky?
I kind of thought they had a shot until I saw the injury report. And I'm wondering if maybe they're doing exactly what you're talking about. Hey, boys, let's rest up for the rest of the way.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't blame them.
It's kind of what Arkansas did when they went there.
Yeah.
I mean, to say there's no shit.
Sam Pittman knew they weren't winning in Athens.
I'll say that it's not like snowball's chance in hell, because I think if there's one thing that we should have at least learned by now, I know Georgia, like we both agree, Georgia is the ultimate eye test team.
Yeah.
Are you really telling me that Stetson Bennett is all of a sudden like everyone does this whole, oh, well, he doesn't have to be that good. Well, what if somebody, I watched South Carolina beat incredibly talented Georgia team. All it takes is 2 or 3 picks, and then all of a sudden you're in an uncomfortable game. And when Kirby gets uncomfortable, that's when he really shines. That's when dumb Kirby is at just his absolute finest. And if I hear one more person tell me he's really a pretty good game coach, like, no, he's freaking idiot. He is a meathead's meathead.
So who's, if you had to guess today, who's in the playoff?
So I think the biggest development that happened last weekend, or the 2 biggest developments besides obviously Bama losing, I think Ohio State's flipped the switch. Remember we talked about if they had a switch flip. I think so. And also, did you happen? I know the Ole Miss game was going. Did you happen to see how many receivers were running free when Caleb Williams was playing quarterback?
Well, I heard about it. We had it on, and I was watching. If you took your eyes off Ole Miss, Arkansas, you missed a score.
So probably also true in the other game. Like that was the problem. I think they were like dueling on what plays to watch, and it like happened to be at the same time. Spencer Rattler, like I've told you, I've never had the gene. I've never said he's awful. He's just what he is. He's a 7. He's a solid 7. But the one thing about him is, he's not going to run the football. Like you do not have to account for him. And Baker, Kyler, and Hurts, you knew they were all ready, willing, and able to run the football, and sometimes looking to run the football, in particular with Hurts. Well, Williams is kind of the same thing, and you now saw like everyone's like, oh shit, he can run, and so now all of a sudden you've got to commit one extra person, and so you don't have an extra safety to keep the deep crossing patterns, the ones where you see the guys like, how did that guy get so open? Well, now all of a sudden those are opening up. I'm keeping my eye on Oklahoma. I think with this kid that they can still run the table, because the rest of the Big 12 is pretty nothing.
Yeah.
I still think Iowa's gettable. Like, are we really having this? Like, I told you I wanted nothing to do with the game. But, I mean, if Clifford doesn't go out, like, that game was clearly in control.
I refuse to listen to this.
Okay. You've been watching our boy Petrus. Man, can he cook. 32 attempts and 150 yards. That is, wow, that's delivering the football.
I still can't believe they won. They were getting dominated, and then Clifford goes out.
Well, no. So there's a video of it on the live stream. As soon as Roberson came in, because I was doing that streaming show, as soon as he came in, and I go, all right, we got to watch this, boys. The snap hit him in the hands and went straight to the ground. I go, take Iowa. I go, that kid can't do that. That kid, and sure
the
enough,
moment was big for him. Yeah.
Well, not only that, it's like, oh, he is. And it wasn't like, when you've got that, there's no calm. I always love when people are, calm him down. No, you've got the shakes. Like,
yeah.
you can't just like pat his pads.
When that defense smells blood. When that defense smells blood.
Oh my God.
You. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It was just over.
They're legitimately good on defense.
The thing is, if it weren't for Georgia, they're like historically good.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you look at like Georgia's in the conversation of the best defense since black people have been able to play football. Like they're in that conversation. And so Iowa would be that type of, that would be maybe not that level, but like one of the best defenses we've seen in the last 5 to 6 years.
An Iowa Ohio State Big Ten championship game could be fun to watch.
Well, I disagree with that because I can safely say, and this is also the hero that said after the 9-6 game of the century between number 1 LSU and number 2 Alabama, that game sucked. That game was ass. That was the worst top 5 game I've ever watched every snap of. That was
I loved it.
Awful.
I loved it. It's watching. I don't know what it is.
Here's what it is.
To me, it's the juxtaposition of the 2 earlier games, Arkansas, Ole Miss, and Oklahoma, Texas, where it's just like crazy. I love the game where one score.
It's the difference.
Game changer.
Well, and on top of that, the one thing that I do love about Iowa on defense, we always use the cliche of all 11 working together. That is 11 guys that work together.
Yes.
And that is fun to watch. Like, you know what I mean? And you never see them pointing at each other if somebody gets beat on a play. Like, it's just, that is like.
They don't make the mistake that they ultimately lured Penn State into.
It's no different than, when you see a well-executed offensive basketball set and you see the ball move perfectly and everything's in sync, it's beautiful. It's the same thing. Like when you watch how Iowa works in sync and they're tossing, they're passing guys off to the other defender. And it's like to watch something work in unison is, I think, really, really fun to watch. Their offense is horrific.
It is. It's bad. It's bad.
That's nepotism at its finest, by the way. Go look up the last name of their offensive coordinator.
Yeah, I'm aware.
Mm-hmm.
But they're fine. They're fine people, and they wave to the kids in the hospital, and
some of the finest.
They're just some of the greatest people in the world.
Some of the finest people on the earth. I'll go. This idea that the SEC is getting 2, it's blatantly wrong, in my opinion. I think the Big Ten has a better chance of getting 2 in right now than the SEC. Because in the end,
I do too, actually.
In the end, for the SEC to get 2 in, the most implausible result
is a West team goes 11-1, beats Georgia, and Georgia.
Correct.
Yeah, that's it. That's the only way. A 2-loss Alabama is not getting in. A 2-loss Ole Miss is not getting in.
First off, we've seen it in the reverse. Georgia lost to LSU. I remember 2018. Don't hold. I'm now at the age where numbers.
It was middle of the year. Yeah,
they lost to LSU. They played Alabama in that thriller, and then Kirby Dum called the fake punt. They had the right look. They had the right look, despite the fact that Alabama's defense stayed on the field and nobody was deep. They had the right look. We saw that. That was the scenario that everybody talks about. They played a 1-score game that went to overtime or whatever, the last play, whatever. And they had 2 losses. They didn't get in. The only way this happens is someone beats Georgia in the title game. And I think that's the most implausible situation. Whereas the Big Ten has more opportunities to get the teams that are going to be there.
Sure. I mean, a 12-0 Iowa losing to Ohio State in a close game, Iowa still could get in.
I mean, here's the real question. I would never bet on this, but would you rather be Ole Miss if you're trying to make the playoff than Alabama? Because yes. Ole Miss's path is quite simple.
Just don't lose.
Win every game on the rest of your schedule, and I think you'll be favored in all of them.
Yeah. And at 11-1, you'd have wins over.
Well, I mean, they'll do the thing they'll have at that point. They'll have 6 top 25 wins, and they're only lost.
You'd have Arkansas, you'd have Auburn, you'd have
you would be the
Texas A&M, you'd have some wins. There would be an argument against them, and there'd be an argument for them, and who knows?
But I mean, we've seen the SEC West team that doesn't go to the title game and doesn't have to take the L in the title game.
Sure.
We've seen that team get in.
Sure.
And that path doesn't involve beating Georgia.
No. You wouldn't have to. Yeah, you'd probably have to beat them in a semifinal, but right. But you wouldn't have, to get to the.
But we're just talking about getting who would you?
So you've got it right now. So right now you've got Georgia, Oklahoma, Ohio State, and Cincinnati.
I guess I'm count me in the crew. I think Cincinnati's losing. I just think it's really hard to go undefeated twice. And then on top of that, their offense is very flawed. The one thing working for them is the American sucks this year.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. They're getting they're
but I think SMU can score on them.
Yeah, I do too. We talked about that today on or Wednesday on the Oxford Exxon podcast. I said they still have to play SMU.
They do.
SMU to save the day.
I'm still also not convinced that. Keep an eye on Arizona State. Now, they could easily lose this weekend in Utah, but Arizona State's one loss was to BYU on the road. And
early.
If you look at that, they had 4 turnovers. It was a 1-possession game down to the end. I still think if there's a 1-loss Pac-12 champion, they're getting in over Cincinnati. And I'm at this point, I'm more leaning towards there's going to be 2 teams from what I'm not going to say the fix is in, because I still think things can break the right way. I think enough teams are beatable. I think for Cincinnati to get in, there is going to have to be 2 losses, a 1-loss Big Ten team, a 1-loss Big 12 team, and Pac-12 team. I think are all getting in because they'll do the 9-game schedule. 9-game conference schedule. If Cincinnati would have to play that schedule, they would not have run the table. And I think they'll do that because in the end, this is designed by these schools.
Yes, for TV. Sure. Hey, appreciate the time as always.
All right, guys.
Talk to you on Saturday. That was Jeffrey Wright. Appreciate his time as we do every single week here on the MPW Digital Pregame Show. Each week we also talk some gambling. We talk about betting lines, both at the college level and in the NFL with Ben Mintz of Barstool Sports. Ben's back in New York this week after spending some time in Vegas with the World Series of Poker. So enjoy this visit with Ben Mintz of Barstool Sports. Ben Mintz, Barstool Sports, back in the big city, back in New York after his stop. How long were you in Vegas, Ben?
I was there 9 days, and so it was a lot of fun. It was full circle going back to the poker world because long before all this media stuff, that was all I did. And, I got to be honest, this Barstool thing, you go back in the poker world and I'm like a hero. I'm just hanging out, interviewing Daniel Negreanu. I'd get an interview with Phil Hellmuth the other night after he busted the final table. And he went on one of his just crazy rants, just dropping F-bombs. He was out of control. And then I cashed 2 of the 5 events I played, which, I felt pretty good about. I was worried I was going to be rusty after a couple of years off, but I didn't think everybody else is too, because nobody else has played either. And I kind of, forgot that part of it, I guess, when I was analyzing it. But I got to say, my game is sharp. And I'm going back from the main event, the 10K, the huge one. I'm playing on Friday, November 5th. And this trip, kind of whetted my appetite. I definitely felt like I played good, but I think I might have a main event run in me. I'm feeling pretty confident. And Dave Portnoy kind of fired some shots at Nate and me about the poker. But, him and Nate have had all these problems forever, and I'm just catching ricochets. He doesn't have a problem with me, but because I'm associated with Nate, he's saying – He said on the Portnoy show, quote, "We're producing some of the worst content in the history of Barstool." And I've been around this company for a year, and I'm not going to say no names, but that is an egregious misstatement. My poker comeback, people were real into it on Twitter. Me interviewing Phil Hellmuth, they got 60,000 views on that interview. If you call call that the worst content, I was like, that's an egregious overstatement.
Portnoy is going to have to walk some of that comment back, in my opinion. He's just going to have to.
Yeah, he just loves messing with me and Nate. And I don't know. I feel pretty good about how it went, though. And the main event thing, if I could make a main event run again, which I've done a couple of times, I think it could go nuts. So had a good trip to Vegas, except for the fact, I'll be real, I got freaking destroyed on the NFL Sunday. I had my worst Sunday. It was not pretty. So we're licking our wounds a little bit and trying to bounce back this week.
All right, we'll get to the NFL in a minute. All right, you speak of your travels. Do you know Do you know whether you're traveling this weekend anywhere, or what's happening with that?
So the Barstool College Football Show, which is Dave, Big Cat, Casey Smith, and Walker, is headed to Knoxville, Tennessee, because the Barstool Sportsbook app is live in Tennessee. That's I guess if you consider Virginia the South, which I kind of don't. So Tennessee is really the only Southern state we're in. So the show is live at the Hill Bar and Grill at 6 p.m. Eastern, 7:30 kickoff. I think the Hill's supposed to be right by campus. It's like 40 minutes. And nobody's saying a word to me in this office. And so, I mean, my read on it, like, I don't know. I feel like they're going to tell me Saturday morning to get on the jet and go. And I'm going to be honest, my feelings are going to be hurt if I don't. You know, I think we've got a great thing going with me and Ole Miss and Barstool and, you know, Kiffin going back to Knoxville. I should be at this. But, you know, I don't really know what to think. I feel like something's up because I'm not getting a straight answer out of anybody. Like, I feel like there's like a plan and this may be content. So I'm going to try not to take business personally. You know, it's easier said than done. But I hope I'm there, and I know they're staying for the game. And 102,000 strong, they're doing the checkerboard thing. This is going to be one of the craziest atmospheres ever, with Blaine coming back to Knoxville and all of a sudden Tennessee after the last 2 weeks. I mean, heck, man, they scored, 107 points the last 2 weeks, something like that. I mean, this is the most excited they've been in quite some time. So Ole Miss is a 3-point favorite. I believe the over-under is 82.5. I mean, I don't really even know how to feel as an Ole Miss fan about this because it's hard to feel confident when our defense looked like that last week.
So let's dive into the game a little bit. When you're analyzing this game, how do you look at Tennessee? Do you say, hey, this is Tennessee team that really looks good, or do you balance that with, yeah, but they played Missouri and South Carolina, two teams that are clearly two of the worst four teams in the SEC? How do you sort of balance all that out?
Yeah, that's what's interesting to me. It's hard. The thing is that they crushed both. And so the thing, they ran for 458 yards against Missouri, and it was like 260 against South Carolina. And that obviously worries me when you look at the Ole Miss run defense right now. I mean, it was just, last week it wasn't for the faint of heart, that's for sure. And so, you know, and also just the home field advantage, and we've seen it all year. COVID last year just crushed it. I mean, these stadiums were lifeless. But I feel like the difference in these primetime night games versus these 11 a.m. games, I mean, they're going to have a huge, huge home field edge here. I mean, I feel like Ole Miss is the more talented team for sure, and I think Ole Miss will be able to score almost at will, but this one's not going to be easy. And I think Vegas only making Ole Miss a 3.5-point favorite, and it's now 3. I thought we'd be 6 or 7, to be honest. And so when it came out a little lower, that concerned me too. So I'm not, I don't know that I'll have any money on it, but I feel like we can pull this out.
Feels like the money has come in sort of on both teams this week. It's kind of the line hasn't budged much. It's just sort of stayed there, 3.5. It never really moved. The way I'm like you. For some reason, I kind of thought when I saw it at first at 3.5, I thought that's going to move to 5.5, and it just never did.
No, I know. I think Tennessee, part of it is just the line thing is the public always overreacts to what they saw the week before. And so Tennessee's looked so good the last 2 weeks in these blowouts that they're kind of becoming a public sentiment team. And then, just knowing that atmosphere with the 102,000 and the home field advantage, the Lane Kiffin storyline, I think people are maybe looking to take Tennessee, especially how Ole Miss's defense looked against Arkansas last week. And I got to mention this too. The parallels between last week and that 2015 Arkansas game were, my mind almost melted thinking about it. Arkansas, if they get the 2-point conversion at the end, the final score would have been the same. They beat it 53-52.
I know.
And then in 15, Ole Miss stopped them on the 2-point conversion, and DeMarquise Gates got the face mask. And then there was a flag on the field. We stopped them. I almost had a panic attack on a flashback. Like I couldn't even mentally handle it. And as an Ole Miss fan, I don't know. I can remember us ever winning a game like that. We always lose the heartbreak daggers like that. And I was after the game. I obviously turned it up on Twitter like I'm known to do, but I didn't know how to feel after the game. Like, it's like I'm so used to just having that just gutted heart after a game like that. And especially against Arkansas to actually win one, it was, wow, it was a heck of a feeling. And big shout out to Kendall Browse. They should have gone for 2 at the end, but that was a horrendous play call. Horrible. All they had to do was run a read option and run the ball. We weren't stopping it. And they decided to throw, taking away half the field. He did us a real favor with that play call.
He did, and I kind of think and I don't know this, and no one's told me this, but I've watched the play a few times. I kind of think Jefferson missed his read. I think Jefferson did something wrong on that play, and it might be one of the reasons why he was so distraught afterwards. I think they meant to run a little underneath shovel pass, and the running back 20 is kind of open, but he ran away from it. I think the play was broken somehow.
Okay, well, I don't know. Either way, just so thrilled Ole Miss pulled that game out. I mean, and did you think the clock should have run out on the play before? I mean,
no. I think they got it right.
Well, they were going to have to review it anyway. You know,
going to review it, and
this isn't high school football. We're at high school. That's running out every time.
Every time. Yeah, no, they were going to put a second back on the clock. If anything, and I've watched it a few times. If anything, I think it was closer to 2 seconds than 0 seconds. So yeah. I think they were going to get to run another play. I actually thought. And no game in the SEC you're ever going to go, boy, those officials were awesome today. But I thought all in all, it was a pretty well officiated game. I did. I thought, yeah, they missed some calls and some stuff happened, but I thought for the most part, they controlled the game. They let contact happen downfield between receivers and defensive backs throughout the game. I thought they let them play, and the result of it was a really entertaining football game.
Oh, yeah, and I got a huge shout-out to Matt Corral, too, because just the effort from him, I mean, you could tell how bad Ole Miss wanted that game by how much they were running him. I mean, they ran him a lot. That two-point conversion, the play they got called back when he trucked an Arkansas guy. But, he's only 200 pounds. He's not a big dude. And, he has 8 rushing touchdowns now. I mean, he's turned into he ran a lot. I remember he had 160 yards rushing at LSU last year in the December game. But, he's turned into that dynamic dual threat. And, I mean, and that makes me feel good about this weekend, too, because, a lot of times when you go on the road in a hostile environment, having a veteran quarterback that's not going to be phased, it really calms the team down in a spot like this, too. But I just thought the effort by him last week, bouncing back from Alabama, and, I mean, he's the front runner. He's plus 125 to win the Heisman now after Bryce Young and Bama lost at A&M. And I just don't know that you can say enough about his effort. I mean, it was that good.
For some reason, I'm bullish on Ole Miss this week, minus the 3. I like it. I sense that you're a little more hesitant. Now, that might be your fandom kicking in here, but what's your thought on the play?
Well, my thing, I'm just hesitant because I'm always a believer in the home underdog, and I know what this atmosphere is going to be like. I mean, I'm not saying I'd never take Tennessee in the spot, but just the way I like to gamble, I always am on that home underdog side in these primetime games because usually that's like the side against the public. This one, I mean, I might end up taking Ole Miss minus 3. The interesting part's the over-under. So the over-under right now is 82.5, which is the highest in the history of the Southeastern Conference.
I like the over.
Well, the Bama one was 79.5, and the Bama one, I'm actually mad at myself that I didn't have the under in that game because Bama's not going as up-tempo this year. They've slowed down their tempo. Their offense is nowhere near as good. And, you had to think after the 63-48 game last year, maybe it's inflated, but this one deserves to be this high. Tennessee's going up-tempo with Josh Heupel's offense. Ole Miss is going up-tempo. This thing's going to get really, really wild. I don't know if I could, 83.5 though. I mean, can you imagine if Ole Miss wins 41-38 and you don't hit the over?
Yeah. But I'll tell you this, I could imagine Ole Miss winning 49-42.
I could too.
See that, and then you're way over. You're comfortably over. I like the over more than I like the under. I like Ole Miss minus the 3 more than I like anything for some reason. I see
your point. No, the thing with Tennessee could be fool's gold here is what you're saying in your instincts. Like, everybody's acting like Tennessee's back, but they just beat Missouri and South Carolina. Ole Miss beat Arkansas and beat real team.
You're giving me Matt Corral and only making me lay 3. And unlike South Carolina, unlike Tennessee, who got to beat up on South Carolina, Missouri, I still think Alabama's a very good team. And I think Arkansas is a really good team. I do. I've watched Arkansas a bunch, and they're solid. They beat Texas. And everybody goes, well, the quarterback thing. Well, the quarterback doesn't play defense. And Arkansas lit up Texas. And Arkansas was going to beat A&M pretty handily before Jefferson got hurt in that game. And then you just saw Arkansas and Ole Miss go toe-to-toe. I mean, that was a heavyweight fight, man. 15 rounds. Both fighters, I mean, they were toast at the end. You know what I mean? I mean, it was that kind of fight. I just think Ole Miss wins the game. You're giving me Matt Corral and only making me lay 3 points. And I'm all in on Team Corral right now, I guess.
Yeah, I think you about taught me. I mean, I was thinking possibly Ole Miss. I think I might end up having the Rebs here too, because the Tennessee thing, I feel like there might be an overreaction the last 2 weeks. I think that may be the play. It's just this atmosphere, though. I mean,
Oh yeah, no, it's real.
The Lane thing. I mean, and Lane's been, I know Lane's kind of staying away from media a little bit this week, which you can't really blame him. I mean, this is just such a circus for him going back with everything going on. And, I think he wants it to be about the team and not about himself. And, honestly, if I was in his shoes, I'd probably do the same thing. So there's no blame there.
All right. So let's get to some of these other games, because I do want to get your thoughts on some of these games, which might be a good play, just kind of your thoughts on them. I'll take them in kind of chronological order. Auburn's at Arkansas. Auburn's a 3.5-point dog against an Arkansas team that finally gets to play at home for the first time in 3 or 4 weeks. What do you think?
Well, the over-under's like 54, 55. I think this thing's going to be a slugfest. I think the over-under's inflated because Arkansas just having that 52-51 game against us. Auburn's run defense isn't near as bad as ours is. And, Auburn's offense is, I mean, we all know it's struggling. I mean, there's no doubt about it. I know they wanted LSU like 24-19, but they were losing to Georgia State. And I don't know, this game feels like a 23-17 type game to me. And so I'm looking at the under. I'm looking at the first half under. As far as the game goes, I'm probably staying away from it, but I'd have to go Arkansas if I had to make a play, but I'm looking at the under.
Florida -10, and it feels like a small number. Florida -10 at LSU. Eli Rick's out now, not going to finish the season. They didn't say he's injured. Tells me they've got all sorts of chemistry issues. I keep thinking that the day is the execution day, and I mean that hyperbolic, but that it's coming up soon. I don't know. Here's a bet for you. Give me a over under. Does Ed Orgeron coach LSU at Ole Miss next Saturday?
Well, it was interesting. I did a Twitter poll during the LSU-Kentucky game for 24 hours does Coach O coach next week? And it was 54% no, and 46% yes. And I got like a lot of votes. I think it was like 6,000 votes or something. And I think it's real touch and go. And I mean, I've got some unnamed sources down there that, I mean, we all know it's bad, but I think it may be worse than we realize. I mean, and especially when the dagger in the coffins, Kayshon Boutte being out for the year. I mean, look at that game in December last year. He set the SEC record in a freaking monsoon against us. Had one of the best games I've ever seen anybody play. You watch LSU play, and I watch him every week. He's all they got. I mean, they can't block. They can't run the ball. They got young receivers. Max Johnson's a young quarterback. He throws off his back foot. He's not confident. Boutte has literally been the one-man gang. If he's out, they're screwed. And then you look on defense, no Stingley, no Ricks. I mean, the writing's on the wall. What's interesting is, do you think they let O stay around to the end of the year out of loyalty because he won the title 2 years ago? Or
it'll be out of loyalty, Ben. If they stick with him through the end of the year, it will be twofold. It will be because you don't want the chaos that can come with an interim coach, and also let him just hang himself.
Well, I think too, like when you're looking at LSU spot, they're going to be looking to make a big hire. And Scott Woodward, their AD, a very highly well-known guy. He hired Jimbo at A&M. He hired Chris Peterson at Washington, his last 2 hires. He's going to be looking to make a big-time hire here. I'm thinking maybe optically they let O stay out till the end of the year just to not fire a coach this close to a national championship a year and a half after, when they're going to hire people, to show how tough of a job it is. Like, oh, you can win a national title and be out 17 months, 19 months later. Yeah. So I think maybe that's a thing, but no, they're done. And, look, what's funny is they announced LSU Ole Miss. I can't believe we're in the CBS game next Saturday. We're the 2:30 game, retiring Eli's number. I'm like 80, 90% coming. I hadn't got the full go ahead. But the last time Ole Miss beat LSU was 2015, and that was my last weekend in Oxford when I went back to school, and I was starting my Shreveport radio show the next week. That's how long it's been. It's crazy. Yeah. But I think LSU's I think it's dead. He's 6 feet. He's, I guess he's 5'5". I mean, he's 5.9 of the 6 feet under at this point. And, I'm real curious to see what Woodward's going to do, because there's some off-field stuff too. And so it almost feels like they need to make a squeaky clean hire on this next one. And, people have talked about Napier at ULF. Yeah, you can't that's not going to really move the needle. I mean, do you throw the bag at Luke Fickell maybe at Cincinnati?
Well, I think they're interested in Fickell. I heard another name today that when I first heard it, I went, and then the person told me why, and I'm like, oh, and that's Mario Cristobal at Oregon.
Yeah.
$4.5 million. You know, there's a lot of talk about Cristobal wanted to wait it out at Alabama, see what happened there. He'd be the guy that replaced Nick Saban, but I mean, who knows when that comes and all of that stuff.
I think that is an interesting one.
But I do think, Ben, that LSU is going to be under some pressure to make a cleanish hire. It's got to be.
I think so too. And Woodward didn't hire this isn't his guy.
No.
Woodward's only been there since 19.
And the pictures on the internet and the women and all the stuff.
And the way he acted, did you see the radio show last week? He bucking up to a caller. I mean, you can't. Come on, man. You know, you can't do all that. Yeah.
Do you like the -10?
Well, so this game, I know I preached the home underdog and stuff. This is an 11 a.m. kickoff, man. This thing's gonna be like 40% full. I mean, this is gonna be bad. This is the farthest thing from Saturday night in Death Valley. You know, the Auburn game was a Saturday night game, but even then, I saw a lot of empty seats in that second half.
Mm-hmm.
Man, it's one of those things. I mean, I'm either not playing it or taking Florida because the only thing with Florida, though, I still have questions about their offensive consistency. They're not the best on offense this year, but LSU's O-line. I mean, how's LSU going to move the ball? You know, they literally have no running game. They can't block, and now they don't have Butte. I mean, it's just it's bad. I mean, I think maybe I might look at now that I talked it out. Maybe I'm looking at the under.
All right. Kentucky, 11th in the country. They're unbeaten. They beat LSU. They're 6-0. Mark Stoops doing a fantastic job in Lexington.
Mm-hmm.
They're laying 20. They're getting. I'm sorry, not laying. If they were laying, I'd be in Vegas right now. I'd be in your old room just betting everything. The Wildcats a 22.5-point dog at top-ranked Georgia. It's a 2:30 Central Time game. CBS 3:30 on the East Coast. 22.5 points.
It's crazy that I still like Georgia. I don't think it's a good matchup for Kentucky because you look at Kentucky and I know they've been better at quarterback this year, but they still just don't have that good of a passing game. And they're more of a running team. And how are you going to run the ball against Georgia? I mean, I think you have to be able to kind of reminds me of the old Bama team. If you're going to be able to move the ball on them, I feel like you have to be able to spread it out. And I don't think Kentucky can do that. They try to beat you being physical. And so, I mean, I can't believe it. I still like Georgia, even at 22.5. I think, Kentucky, I liked them against Florida. I was on that. I thought that game's always close. I wasn't shocked. LSU's a dead man walking, and they kicked them, last week. But, man, I don't even like Kentucky in the 22.5 here. I mean, they're making it high for a reason, but how is Kentucky going to move the ball in this game? I just don't see how.
Alabama comes off that loss to Texas A&M, got really beat at the line of scrimmage by the Aggies. They're a 17.5-point favorite at Mississippi State. It's a 6:00 game on ESPN. You know, it's a weird thing, Ben. I'm not big on State. We've talked about this, but now State can create some defensive problems for Alabama. State can win the line of scrimmage in that matchup, and it makes me wonder about that number a little bit.
Yeah, and I remember there was a game, it was either 2 or 3 years ago. There was a game at Alabama where Alabama won 24-0, but they couldn't move the ball. State just couldn't either. And State's defensive line dominated that football game. Tua was playing in that game. And I remember thinking exactly what you're saying. State's super physical and tough up front. I mean, I'm not laying the 17 or 18 here. I think Bama, probably wins by 14. What do you think, 31-17, something like that?
Yeah, it's somewhere in there.
I don't think Bama loses back-to-back. And then Starkville and Tuscaloosa are really close, too. So there's going to be a ton of Bama fans there. I think it's a 45-minute drive. But I'm not laying the 17. But on the other hand, too, idiot gamblers will do the transitive property thing and be like, oh, Mississippi State won at A&M and Bama lost at A&M and I could take Mississippi State. But, that's bad logic.
Yeah, it's terrible logic.
People do that. That's people do. Football's all matchups. Certain teams match up better in places. And you mentioned State's D-line does match up well. And Bryce Young, great quarterback, but not that mobile either. So we'll see. I think Bama wins like I said, 31-17, something like that, 28-14.
Any other college games have your eye this week from a betting standpoint?
as far as college, I've went through them once, pretty strong. No, I guess I'm not like super offhand that do right now. I'm going to look at them more as it goes in the week. I actually had UL Lafayette last night +5 against App State, so that was a good one. Don't go into Lafayette on a Tuesday night and expect to win. The Texas-Oklahoma State's very interesting to me because how will Texas bounce back after blowing that big lead? But Oklahoma State, it's weird. You always think high-powered offense a bad D, and they stink on offense, and they're good on defense this year. It's like bizarro world. Also, A&M's a weird one this week. They're laying 9. I know Missouri's bad, but boy, it feels kind of sketchy off that Bama win. You know, it kind of feels trappy early kickoff there. So I'm keeping an eye on. And the last one I will mention, Cincinnati's laying 21 against Central Florida. They're going to win by 40 because Central Florida and them have been battling for that American Athletic Conference title the last few years. They're going to take this game super, super serious because that's been their rival for it. And Malzahn, I mean, boy, Central Florida, what happened, man? They're a mess. I don't know if you've seen them this year, but they're rough.
Yeah, no, they've kind of fallen apart.
So I think Cincinnati's going to kill them.
You were upset about your NFL Sunday performance last week, so I'm going to give you a first crack at some redemption here. Like I'm looking at these games, Cincinnati looks like they're putting it together. They go to Detroit. Looking at games that kind of catch my eye. Arizona Cleveland obviously is going to be a great game.
Baker Mayfield against Murray.
Yeah, it's a great game. Dallas at New England. Dallas is playing really well, looking kind of like a Super Bowl caliber sort of team. Seattle and Pittsburgh, 2 teams that really need to win at this point. They're going to be playing kind of desperate. You got Green Bay at Chicago, that big rivalry game. Buffalo at Tennessee is the Monday night game.
Yeah, that's a revision. Tennessee blew them out on a Tuesday night last year during COVID. I'll tell you the one I'm looking at. I like Denver by 4 at home over the Raiders with all the stuff going on with Vegas right now. I mean, you know, I'm still in shock that John Gruden, who signed a 10-year, $100 million deal, and we're not going to get into all the details, but it's pretty wild that he just got fired over something from 10 years ago. That's crazy, man. I mean, you could anyway. I'm not going to say any more.
Well, it's interesting. What's interesting about that is I'm not defending at all, not even a little bit what was in the emails. But what is interesting, and this is undeniable, regardless of what you think of it, is that boy, this felt like a witch hunt. I mean, it's like somebody was intentionally after. This was revenge a little bit against Gruden. I'm not excusing the content of his emails.
No, you can't say that stuff. But I think the Goodell stuff, him calling, whatever, we're not going to repeat it here. But what he called Goodell, I feel like Goodell's not a guy. It doesn't seem like he takes being slighted very well.
Yeah,
I feel like that. I feel like that when that came out, I feel like they were like, we got to get this guy out of here.
I agree completely.
And so that's kind of what I think. But I think you got to go against the Raiders this week. I mean, how can you not with everything that's going there? And, look what happened last week. They lost at home to the Bears. That weird stuff going on. I'm looking at over 52.5 in the Thursday night game in the Bucs-Eagles because the Bucs secondary is like depleted right now. And I think this game could be really high scoring. The Bucs have been playing a bunch of overs. I think Jacksonville's got a shot to get their first win under Meyer, plus 3.5 at home. I don't think Miami can lay 3.5 on the road against anybody right now. So I'm looking at Jacksonville. Curious about Detroit. Boy, I feel bad. You see Dan Campbell's press conference. I mean, I know people get mad about the no crime. I mean, I don't have any problem with it, man. He's his first time as a head coach.
He cares.
Yeah, and his poor team. I mean, freaking Justin Tucker, it's a 66-yarder off the crossbar, and then they lose on a 54-yarder. I mean, I feel bad for him.
And yet they have their hands full with the Bengals because the Bengals are really looking.
They are. Burrow's a little banged up.
Up and coming team. Yeah.
Burrow's a little banged up. How about Jamar Chase, by the way? Holy
a stud.
Yeah, he's a stud. I sort of think the Colts bounce back, but it's hard to lay 9.5. They got their hearts ripped out on Monday. And the other game you didn't mention, this Chargers-Ravens game is fascinating. Justin, my mind almost melted when Cleveland picked Eckler up and threw him in the end zone Sunday. That was one of the coolest football plays I've ever seen. I just saw the highlight. I was like, there's no way that just really happened. Try to milk the game and for the defending team to pick him up and throw him in the end zone. That got to me. That was one I couldn't believe it. But that's what I'm looking at. The Vikings-Carolina game is real interesting to me, too, because Carolina started 3-0. Sam Darnold blew that. And I had Carolina Sunday, and I'm still mad about it. They were up the whole game against Philly, and Darnold throws multiple second-half interceptions. What are you doing? Other team can't move the ball. All you have to do is take care of it. But I kind of think Carolina +1 may be worth a look here in Minnesota, laying a point on the road. Yeah, I guess that's kind of most of them. But Denver, look, they may get me in this Denver game, but like with what's going on with Vegas, I'm happy to lose money in the spot. I mean, Gruden was the Raiders. He got a 10-year, $100 million deal. He's the offense. Now they got some random dude in there. I don't know. You got to go against that. Also think it's hard. Gosh, Geno Smith actually looked okay in there, but man, losing Russell Wilson's a dagger for them. And Pittsburgh's got such a good D. You got to think Pittsburgh should, might look at the under there too, though.
Yeah, I was going to say Pittsburgh's got issues of their own.
Oh, no, their offense is bad. Yeah, they finally got Najee Harris going last week, though. He had 120 yards. But, yeah, so that's kind of what I'm looking at. But, man, I think the mistake I've been making, and it's like the Barstool thing, like gambling, we're all about responsible but fun. I've been putting too many games on my card for, like, entertainment, and I need to get more selective. Like college, I've been putting out 15, 20 picks and, like, 10 on – man, Brandon Walker does like 8 or 10 and 5 or 6 on Sunday. And I need to realize if I want to like win, I need to do that more and quit playing every game, basically.
We'll be looking for your content throughout the course of the weekend. Hopefully you'll get to hop on that.
Yeah, I hope so. I feel like I said, my instincts, we'll see, but I just feel like I'm going to be on that plane and at the Hill. And once again, 6 o'clock, whether I'm there or not, come check out the college football show. And I don't know about you, Neal. I'm hearing about a lot of Ole Miss fans making this trip. I'm here. I've talked to a lot of people that are going.
Oh, I would think so. Listen, I think a night game at Neyland's a lot of fun. I've been there several times, and Ole Miss escaped last week, and they're 13th in the country, and Alabama lost, and the SEC West is kind of open again. And I mean, someone else has to beat Alabama, but the way Alabama's playing, I wouldn't rule that out. I mean, I think someone can get them. Florida almost got them. A&M did get them. Mm-hmm. Someone can get them. So there's a lot.
At Auburn's always weird for them, too.
Of course.
I feel like maybe it seems like Bama's a little more flaky on the road than at home, but look, you never know. And I mean, I'm excited. I appreciate you. I've really enjoyed coming on this every week. It's been a lot of fun. And, hopefully, knock on wood, I see some Rebel fans in Knoxville. And if not in Knoxville, LSU Ole Miss is the one I never try to miss. I'm really looking to make the Grove, make next Saturday. I got reservations at City Grocery next Friday too. I don't want to break them.
Sweet. Well, we'll look forward to talking to you next week about LSU, Ole Miss, and everything else. So have a great weekend, and thanks as always for your time, Ben.
I appreciate it.
That was my friend Ben Mintz, Barstool Sports. Appreciate him as always. If you're watching this in the stream, we'll be back with you in just a couple of hours. I feel like I've been streaming all day, so we'll be back with Hand Raise Guys tonight, brought to you by Comer Heating and Air, Southern Air Conditioning and Heating. That's at 7, and that'll be the Friday Oxford Exxon podcast. Chris Lowe of ESPN will join early in the show. We'll talk to him, then we'll take calls on the Rafters Music and Food Hotline. Talk to you guys about whatever it is you would like to talk about. I want to thank, Pete DeWeese, Ryan Brown, Jeffrey Wright, and, of course, Ben Mintz for their time this week as we preview Ole Miss at Tennessee. We will be back with the MPW Digital Postgame Show on Saturday night, probably fairly late, and we'll probably go well into Sunday morning. Jeffrey Wright will join. Brian Rippey will join. Might even get Zach Berry, who will be on the scene in Knoxville, might get Zach on the horn as well as we recap Ole Miss and Tennessee Saturday night, Neyland Stadium in Oxford. Thanks to everyone for watching. Appreciate you making this show a part of your week. It's been getting great numbers, which we really appreciate. Don't forget, if you're in Ridgeland, 720 Highland Colony Parkway in Ridgeland, be a great place to go. Head over to Walk-Ons. Enjoy your Saturday of college football, your Sunday of the NFL, and we'll be with you again on Saturday night with the MPW Digital Post-Game Show presented by Walk-On Sports Bistreaux. Until then, take care.